I can teach you how to bewitch the mind and ensnare the senses. I can tell you how to bottle fame, brew glory, and even put a stopper in death.
Welcome to Snape Chat, the voice of the Snapedom, the podcast where we discuss all things Snape, always. Join us as we dive into the world of the bravest man we ever knew, in art, fanfic, meta, and more. Obviously. This is Snapecentric with episode 49, the summer reading program. There's lots of fics from Deep Shadows 2, Humanveil, danpuff, Ailec 12, Barkin, Morbidmuch, Caligryphy, and Zain. The readers include Deep Shadows 2, Faithless, Harrop, Serena E.W., Mango, Karas, and Masao. I'm joined by T-Goblin, also known as Deep Shadows 2, and Masao, as we listen to the stories. Enjoy the show. This is Snapecentric, and I'm here with Masao.
Hi.
And our special guest, T-Goblin.
Well, T-Goblin is my Discord handle. Most people in fandom are going to recognize me as Deep Shadows too.
Okay.
That's typically, T is just what I go by on Discord because that's my nickname.
Oh, okay. Nice. Glad to have you here. You're one of our authors and readers.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. This is a really cool concept.
Anyway, we have a long show, so this is our first summer reading program, and I decided that all you listeners deserve to have completed fics to read because not everybody likes works in progress like I do. So all of these fics are complete. There's also a fun activity to go with this. It's called Summer Reading Program Bingo.
Oh boy.
Basically, there's 8 stories, which lent itself to a 3x3 bingo card. And you can read all of them or any of them. And if you leave your address, which will be seen by no one but myself, I will send you some nifty Snape Chat stickers.
Nice.
Yeah. So anyway, without further ado, our first fic is called I Hope This Comes Back to Haunt You by Humanveil. And this is read by Faithless.
I Hope This Comes Back to Haunt You by Humanveil. Summary. Severus Snape, from first curse to first kill, or the making of a Death Eater. A lone flame flickers, its light casting a glow across the loft, streaking through dust and dirt alike. Severus sits, back to the wall and book in hand. It crinkles beneath his touch, small slim fingers tracing the curve of a cauldron. Thick black lines are painted across the page, the image displayed almost overflowing with a deep and simmering red. He scans the text as quick as he can. A potion. Poison. Its name listed in big black letters along the top. The Brew of Berserker. Effect. Anger-inducing. Rage to the point of delirium. Lethal dosage approximately 670 milliliters. Ingredients: aconite, hellebore, bulbadox essence, moonseed, mint, pearl dust. Out of it! His mother's voice, clipped and coarse. Never a gentlewoman, Eileen. Well, not really. Severus snaps the book shut on reflex, the edge of his finger catching between the pages, paper slicing through skin. He hisses, quick and quiet, and brings his hand to his mouth to suck the blood away. Tea time, Eileen says. Her forehead is furrowed, mouth downturned. Severus knows there'll be a discussion later. Your father's home. He swallows the instinct to sigh, knows better than to let it escape. The book is tucked back into its place, a chest of his mother's old things hidden in the back end of the loft. Leather-bound books with glittering spines and frayed pages. Faded parchment scattered across boxes, vials yellowed and dusty and filled with things he can't name. Her special things, from a time before, an endless source of conflict. Eileen's head disappears from the loft's entrance, and Severus scrambles to his feet, careful to blow the candle out before he dashes out the opening, hands wiping dust and spit on 2 small trousers as he follows his mother's step. He's right about the later. It comes as a guise of putting him to bed, his mother's hand firm on his shoulder as she leads him upstairs, away from his father. Already half a bottle in, breath smelling of cheap whiskey and voice starting to slur as it teeters the edge of irritable and mad. Severus counts the steps as he takes them, goes over what he's read before. 1. Aconite. 2. Hellebore. 3. Bulbadox essence. Eileen waits until they're out of his father's earshot to speak. Does this often, Severus has noticed, caution increasing as the years go by. He's seen the one she keeps hidden in the kitchen, thin and long and curved at the handle, carved of light cedar with a core of unicorn hair. He's read about what witches can do. There's no need to be cautious, he thinks. Not if she'd just use it. How many times do I have to tell you? 4. Moonseed. 5. Mint. He's circled back to Hellebore by the time they reach his room, Eileen's voice still hissing at him. He makes for the door, but the hand on his shoulder stops him. The grip tightens, fingers digging against the fabric of his shirt, his mother's blouse, old and torn, stained yellow. Listen to me, Severus, she says, her voice cold, hard, warning. He stops and turns, arms circling his torso, defiant. I am, he lies. You're not, says Eileen. She can see through him in ways his father can't, Severus thinks, her blank black stare more unnerving than his father's screams. I don't like repeating myself, boy. I've told you to leave the chest alone. I expect you to listen. Not everything in it is safe. A scoff tickles his throat. Fine, he tells her, the word forced through his teeth. He used to argue, claim that there was nothing else to do, that the chest was the only interesting thing in the whole house. He knows better now, has learned. Forgiveness over permission. Eileen sighs, an air of resignation about her. Straight to bed, she says, watching as he crosses the threshold of his room. We'll be planting more thyme tomorrow. He pretends to do as he's told, impatient as he waits, listens, tracks his mother's step out of the hall and down to the kitchen. It's only once he knows Eileen is gone that he shuts the door and pulls the book from beneath the pillow. Notes, 1967, new. 09/11/1967. Found another of Mum's books, Veiled Poisons and How to Spot Them. Read about the brew of Berserker. Dark red, mint taste. Makes drinker angry. Thoughts? Nothing special. Got caught. Again. Told to stop sneaking to the loft. Won't. Promised we plant more herbs tomorrow. Uncertain. Jar of cockroaches. Up to 15. There's a fireplace in the living room, shoved on the left-hand wall and flanked by 2 threadbare armchairs. Their golden cream colour faded along the cushions. It's only small, enough to heat the room on a good day. Severus sits in front of it now, arms outstretched with his mother's book beside him. Spells suitable for ages 10 to 12 printed across the front. He's been making his way through the list, his mother teaching him in his father's absence. A bargaining chip. Be good, she'd say, and we can... Today he does it alone, the book flipped open to first-year spells. Try something practical, he'd been told, and so he'd nicked a few wood shavings from the neighbour's lot, and not from the coal stock near the privy out back, lest his father find out, and thrown them amongst the pitiful pile of ash in the fireplace. Incendio, he reads, the fire-making charm, used to conjure a jet of flames. He'd done it by accident once, years ago in a fit of anger, the corner of his bedsheets catching alight as he'd whinged and whined, wanting to stay awake. They'd been destroyed in seconds, his mother too slow to act. His father had made him sleep on the floor for a week. Severus shakes away the memory and focuses on what's in front of him, on the chipped, splintered cuts of wood and the way they fall over each other, calling to him. Incendio, he thinks, his eyes narrowed to slits. Incendio. Incendio! Nothing happens. The wood doesn't catch. His body is void of the usual tingle of magic. the addictive current that seems to thrum through his veins. He tries again, imagines bright, blinding flames, the room flooded with warmth. "Get away from the fire," Eileen calls. Severus hears her approaching, knows the soft, careful cadence of her step, so unlike his father's. "Your dad'll be home any minute." "But I can do it," Severus says, murmured, distant, assured. "I know I can," he thinks, "if I can do it accidentally." "Bloody in love with that book," he hears his mother say. She's watching him now, he can tell, can feel it. If he turns, he thinks, she'll be leaning against the door frame with the cuppa in her hand. "Don't make me tell you twice." Tell me all you want, he thinks. He's been trying too long to give up now. Incendio. He touches his hands to the firewood, soft ash clinging to his fingers and staining the skin, palms darkened and fingernails dirty. He mutters the spell under his breath. Incendio! Incendio! The irritation helps, the feeling of inadequacy. It brings his magic out, makes it leak. "You need to learn control," his mother had said, not a week ago, when he told her of the red-headed girl from the other side of the river, of how he'd made a branch snap in his anger. Incendio! You should be glad I'm trying, he thinks. Incendio! A spark erupts, yellow-orange and faint. He utters the spell again, eyes wide in fascination as fire finally catches, each splinter of wood lighting one after the other, the small ball of light growing and growing until the flames erupt, red, orange, yellow, twisting and arching and radiating warmth. He turns, looks back to Eileen, his mouth stretched in a grin, a little ball of light expanding in his chest. Pride, the addictive ardour of accomplishment. It warms him more than the fire does. It doesn't last long, though. Never seems to. "The book," Eileen warns, as the front door bangs open. There's only seconds for Severus to realise what's going to happen before it does. He turns back to find embers creeping along the hearth, the edges of his mother's book catching alight. He feels his father's step behind him, hears his mother fetch her wand. He scoots away from the fire, the flames growing while whatever happiness he felt drains, his pride replaced with cold, panicked dread. He starts, but it's futile. Tobias's hand closes on his collar, the fabric cutting against his throat. "Shut it," it means, "or else." "What have I bloody told you?" "You wrote all this?" Lily is looking at him, her head tilted, mouth twitching, eyes alight with curiosity. She shifts her gaze between him and the book in her lap. His book. The pages dirtied and crinkled and covered in a messy, minuscule scrawl. He makes a noise in the back of his throat, isn't entirely sure what it's supposed to mean. "Yes," he says, soft. He's fiddling with his hands, fingers locked together while his thumbs pick at their opposite perlicue. The skin turns a soft red from irritation. They're sitting cross-legged in their usual spot, a small span of overgrown grass scattered with weeds and the occasional flower, the bushes and surrounding trees separating them from the other children. Lily's hair falls around her like flame, blending with the gentle magenta of her dress, the material ironed and cleaned and of good quality, so unlike Severus's own attire, his torn stained shirt hidden beneath his overcoat. He focuses on the way Lily's eyes glitter beneath the sunlight, and tells himself she doesn't notice. "They're my notes," he explains, "from things my mum told me." Lily brightens. "About magic," she says, still with that underlying thrum of excitement. Secrecy, the last word whispered. Severus nods and her posture straightens, attentive, eager. "Will you tell me?" Severus twitches as if he tried to shrug. "You can just read it," he offers, but Lily shakes her head. "I want to hear it from you," she says. She grins and lies against the grass, closes the notebook and pats the space beside her. "Come on, Sev. You always have the best stories." "Not stories," he says. "It's real," Lily finishes. Her giggle carries with the wind, soft and airy. I know. Sorry." He sighs and moves to lie down beside her. She hands him his notebook, and he takes it, the pads of his finger running along its frayed spine, the paper rustling beneath his hands. He opens it at random and sees his own spidery score staring back at him. 2307, 1968. The Battle of Ailec and Egbert. There was a wizard, he starts, in the Middle Ages. He twists his head against the grass and meets Lily's gaze, watches the way she blinks up at him, expectant, interested. It makes his stomach flutter for reasons he can't explain. Ailec the Evil. He trails off into stories of short-lived glories and a rather violent downfall. Lily hangs on to his every word, just as he had done with his mother. She insists on story after story, her eyes wide with wonder as they move from Ailec the Evil to the soap blizzard of 1378, the poison pandemic of the Middle Ages, the simplified crimes of Grindelwald. They spend the afternoon like that, laying side by side and thumbing through the pages of Severus's notes, their excited voices and soft giggles scarcely stopping for a minute. It's only once the sun is set that the peace is broken. Petunia shrieks about dinner cutting through the barrier of bushes. Severus sits up when he hears it, disappointment tightening his chest. He follows the hint of blonde hair that peeks through a cluster of branches and finds Petunia waiting, watching, her arms folded and lips thinned. She's odd-looking, Petunia, thin and angular with a long face, expression twisted to one of disdain. Severus has never liked her. "Now, Lily," Petunia calls, impatient. Lily rolls her eyes but gets to her feet. "I'm coming," she yells back, sparing Severus a glance. "Can we do spells tomorrow?" she asks, hurried, hopeful, hushed. "Like that one you told me. Petrificus totalis," Severus says. He nods, flashes a fleeting smile. He watches her stand, blades of grass falling from her dress as she wipes her back. "I'll bring a different book," he calls, but she's already walking away, almost out of sight, one hand lifted in a wave while the other is grasped by her older sister. The two of them a blur of red and beige as they pass through the bushes, towards their waiting dinner. They're both well out of sight by the time Severus rolls on to his back, fingers clenching around blades of grass and pulling while he looks at the setting sun. Absent-minded, habitual. There is at least another hour, he thinks, until the sun sets completely, the greying sky above still streaked with slashes of pinks, blues, purples. He'll leave then, he decides, his mother's unofficial curfew. After all, he has no dinner waiting. Notes, 1971. New. 12/05, 1971. Went to Diagon Alley with Lily for school supplies. Shopped separately. Mam refused to babysit muggles. She got more than me, but Mam said I can take her chest. Went to Gringold's, Aranald's Apothecary, Flourish and Blots, Ollivander's, Nearly New for the Needy. Tried chocolate frogs. They squirmed like real ones. Afterwards, met with Lily again, snuck book, Orenda Aquia, and experimented with the tadpoles in the lake. Managed to control their course, but 3 died. Only 1 was my fault. Days till Hogwarts, 112. "Snape! Severus!" He steps forward, tries not to let his nervousness show as he takes his seat on the stool, feet kicking at the ground as he waits, impatient. There are people talking, whispering, theorizing. It mixes together to a quiet murmur, the only thing discernible a laugh from the Gryffindor table as the sporting hat falls over his eyes, darkness enveloping him as the hat hums, low and deep, contemplative. "Fascinating," it says, quiet, only for Severus to hear. "Oh, yes." Another laugh from the crowd, that mocking tilt familiar already. The boys from the train, both sorted the second the hat hit their head. In the hush of the hall, Severus can hear their voices, the black boys joke that maybe they'll just send him home. He grinds his teeth, hates the panic that grips his chest. Slytherin, he thinks. His hands are balled into fists, tight enough to sting, the sharp edge of a nail digging against the soft flesh of his palm. Slytherin. even if he has to be in it alone. Slytherin, eh? The hat asked. I suppose. You've got it in you, no doubt. Irritation tingles beneath his skin. Then put me there, he says aloud. Hissed. This is the one thing, he thinks. This one thing, the axis on which all his plans are based. Not so quickly now, the hat tells him. It's followed by indiscernible murmuring, Severus's impatience growing as it takes its time. Ambition, loyalty, bravery. His nails break through the skin. A drop of blood pools on his palm. Drips. The hall fills with gentle chatter the longer Severus stays put. Seconds passing like hours as he waits, cheeks flushed beneath the hat's dusty fabric. He's distantly relieved, half his face is shielded from view. The sorting hat continues. Cleverness, too. Oh, yes. Yes, very clever indeed. You do well in Ravenclaw, but no, it's not the knowledge you want, is it? It's the power. They're the same thing, Severus thinks. Interchangeable, almost. Knowledge gets you power, and power gets you knowledge. Anyone with half a brain could tell you that. A chuckle. Soft this time, not mocking. For his ears only. Yes, the hat says. You would think that, wouldn't you? Son of a prince. Yes. All right, then. Off you go now. Off towards Slytherin! Relief hits like a breath of fresh air. The hat is removed, his fists uncurling. He wipes a bloody palm against his sleeve and stands, his mouth twitching with satisfaction. He spares Lily a glance. Quick, fleeting. She's smiling at him softly, sadly. Almost. A light frown to her forehead. It morphs to annoyance as Black says something from behind her. Words drowned by the cheers coming from Slytherin table. A boy greets him. Tall, blonde, wealthy. It's obvious in the air that surrounds him, in the way he holds himself. Back straight, chin lifted. There is a crisp collar peeking beneath his school robe, a silver ring on his left hand, a family crest engraved. Take a seat, he says, nodding to the space beside him. His voice is clear, posh. The hand that pats Severus's back heavy and warm. He tries not to flinch.
That was I Hope This Comes Back to Haunt You by Humanveil, read by Faithless. I really liked how, especially the first two sections where he's relating to his mom and then to Lily. I don't know. His mom is always holding him down, but Lily is kind of the opposite and is asking for more, basically.
Well, I mean, his mom isn't like necessarily holding him down as she's trying in her own way, it sounds like, to be protective.
Right.
But in his eyes, it's holding him down.
Right.
I really like the format with the sort of notebook, the notes that he's taking being kind of like the framing tool for
Yeah.
I like that kind of thing.
This is the 90,000 word one shot.
Wow.
Yeah. It's one of those that just flows. And, you want to read it in one sitting because there's not a good stopping point.
Right.
But it's a very good fic that I read quite a long time ago. I just wanted to include that, even though we have two fics that don't feature any sort of ship.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's okay.
It's sort of more of a character-focused fic.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's all Snape.
All Snape all the time.
Yes. Which I love.
I think what I like about this like sort of journal framing device is it's very punchy and matter of fact, but you can infer a lot from what's not said, what's sort of between the lines in those journal entries.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I really like that in fan fiction. I think that I read a fic for a previous episode, that Lexan fic, A Life More Ordinary. Like, it's a very different kind of fic, right? But like, it sort of reminds me of that writing style where, it's very straightforward and almost omits a lot of details, but you can infer the details from what's not being said.
Mm-hmm.
I liked the imagery, especially of like casting incendio and accidentally lighting a book on fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was very evocative.
Did a very good job of rendering the scene.
Mm-hmm. Highly recommend.
What year was that written?
Oh, gonna have to look. It's from 2020.
Okay. You said you were a while ago, but like in my mind, it's still
I guess 5 years isn't that long.
2020 was yesterday, but it was
Right?
5 years ago.
Yeah.
What do you mean? It was last year.
Yeah. Aren't we still in 2020?
Right.
And the next one is a snary, read by Masao, called So Lonely Without Me by Caligryphy. Oh, okay. The next one is a snary by danpuff, one of her finest works, called Contempt, read by Pirrup.
This is from Contempt by danpuff. One day he's going to hex Snape's giant nose off of his stupid face. He'll rip the nasty greasy hair right out of his head. For now, Harry can do little but grit his teeth and glare defiantly as Snape sneers at him from the front of the class, belittles him for all to see and hear. The way Snape behaves, no one will blame Harry when he finally loses it. With luck he'll make it to graduation. Maybe he'll see Snape on Diagon Alley one day. Snape will be rude and Harry will just jinx him silly. The rage heating his blood, uselessly now, will fuel his spell work then. He'll tie Snape's tongue into knots, his tongue, so that he trips over every foul word, clean his mouth out with soap, his mouth. Soap bubbles spilling out and onlookers will laugh. Snape's face will burn a ruddy ugly red. Snape with his tongue in his mouth might well be a boggart, the way Harry's stomach swoops and his heart races. It's fear is what it is. Fear of what? What are you afraid of, Harry? And the only way to conquer that fear is to... Harry laughs at the caricature of Snape in his head, more so than the man glaring down at him now. Easier to laugh than to scream or cry or any other outburst that could come from the storm within. He doesn't know why it's so confusing, why it's so much. It's just Snape. Mean, ugly, awful Snape. Laughter earns Harry detention. Being mocked doesn't sit any better with Snape than being called a coward. Harry does that too, calls him coward, because Snape gives him detention with Filch. Just as he has all year, he doesn't want to be alone with Harry. Harry pretends not to know why. Just as Harry pretends not to know why he's so grateful some days, or why he's agitated others. Better to calmly scrub trophies by torchlight, listening to Filch mumble and mutter in a dark corner. Better this than to scrub cauldrons or sort flobberworms and, inevitably, lose his place or lose his temper, because he won't be able to stop glaring at Snape, at his crooked teeth and his hooked nose, and his fingers, long slender fingers with yellowed skin and uneven nails. They wield wand and quill so expertly cruel, that is, cruel of word and cruel of spell. Fingers that grasped him, pulled him closer, but... No, don't think of the shack. Think of... fingers that would fold around his throat, and liquid heat down his spine, and fingers that would grasp his jaw firmly, hold him still as Snape leans in and growls dangerously. Words of... well, the words don't matter much. Harry shivers just to think of it. Fear and hate. Hate that burns like lava in his gut. Hate that creeps and crawls beneath his skin. Hate for everything that Snape is. What is there not to hate? From his oily scalp to his smelly feet. Do they smell, he wonders? Trapped in his boots all day, trudging through mess after mess, they must be. They might be pale, too, and slender. Harry's never seen them, but he can imagine them. How soft they might feel. No, they wouldn't be soft. No part of Snape could ever be soft. They must be rough and smelly and crusty. He's sure. He's sure. Hate, for the way Snape's lips curled nastily over his teeth, the smooth, sharp edge of his voice when he tears into Harry, the vile glee in dark eyes when he gives detention after detention after detention. Hate for the way that Snape never quite sees Harry. He sees James the enemy, or Lily the friend. Never Harry the... whatever he is. Sometimes, though, Harry hates Snape for seeing him too well. When their eyes meet and it feels as though Snape is diving into his soul and Harry panics. He panics. It's too much, too much, too much. A gentle caress to raw, bleeding nerve. Most of all, Harry hates Snape for hating him. No, worst of all, Harry hates Snape for... well, Harry can't bear to think of that, can he? I do wish you'd give Snape a break, Hermione scolds. The 8th year common room is still full when Harry returns from detention. Everyone is cramming for their newts, or at least pretending to. Ron and Neville exchange uneasy frowns. Harry grinds his teeth and glares off into the distance. Few speak ill of Snape these days, hero that he is. He is not beloved, certainly not over this past year. The war's end has not made Snape any less of a taskmaster or a bastard. You were the first one to defend him after all, Hermione continues. You know better than anyone what he's done. Yeah, I do, don't I? Harry retorts. Who knows more of Snape's horrible, nasty behavior than Harry? Neville might come close, but Snape's never loathed Neville the way he loathes Harry. Snape's ire is all his. No one loses more points than Harry, or earns more detention, and Snape reserves his most potent venom for when he's eviscerating Harry, for his arrogance and his laziness and his stupidity. It's worse now than it ever was. Like Harry got too close, and Snape is reacting, shoving Harry aside and running away. And Harry, well, Harry's never gone down easy, has he? He stands back up and blocks Snape's path because one shouldn't back down from a bully, should they? It isn't that he wants Snape's attention. Except perhaps, Harry knows the horribleness and nastiness isn't all there is. It was he, Harry, who stood before the Wizengamot, fighting tooth and nail to make them see, to make them understand all Snape had sacrificed, all he had done for them, without gratitude or even acknowledgement, the strength of his character, the unparalleled bravery. Who had done more for the war, after all? And when he's in bed, his own words ring in his ears, the nightly rants, and his vehement defense, all bleeding together. He remembers class, remembers Snape's voice, cold and sharp as ice. What do you find so amusing, Potter? It's you, sir, he said, voice pumped full of false cheer. It's you. He remembers his fervent prayers at Snape's bedside. He remembers day after day, the fresh bandages applied to Snape's neck, how he looked like a corpse lying on that bed, too pale and too still. He remembers the anger and hate he gathered close to his heart, huddling closer for warmth. Don't you dare, Snape. Don't do this to me. Come back. Come back. Look at me. Come on, mate, Ron snapped one afternoon. Hermione hushed him, flapping her hands, but Ron's face was flushed as he glared into the hospital room. Why do you care so much, Harry? Harry didn't have an answer for him. Ron stormed out in a huff, Hermione on his heels, and the question haunted Harry all throughout the day. Why? 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 It should have been easy. He'd beaten the sentiment to death before the Wizengamot. He knew the answer in his bones, and when, days later, Snape opened his eyes, Harry's first thought was you. It's you. Relief and joy lodged in his throat and blurred his eyes, all of the grief and fear not quite receding, but swirling together. Harry grabbed Snape's wrist, held on for dear life, because he didn't know how to not touch him. When Harry dreams, he dreams of Snape's hands, pale and soft and cool to the touch. He dreams of his slender wrist, the steady thud of a pulse, dark, inscrutable eyes. He dreams of a silvery doe in a dark forest, a dark knight with a mighty sword, of a bowl and swirling memories, of trembling fingers clutching his shirt, a rough voice pleading, "Look at me. Look at me." Matters worsen as the year progresses. The closer to Newts, the closer to freedom, the less bearable it becomes. Everyone acts out. Headmistress McGonagall has little time and little patience, certainly not for petty grievances. The enmity between Harry and Snape is theirs and theirs alone. Only Hermione dares intrude. "The war is over," she snaps in defense. "Enough of this." Neville loses his cool soon after, draws his wand on Snape. Harry steps between them without thought, heart hammering in his chest, in his head, in his throat. Blood, snake, sword. Neville glares over Harry's head at Snape, jaw tight, hand trembling. "Dear me," Snape drawls. "Did I strike a nerve, Longbottom?" Neville shifts his arm, keeps his wand trained on Snape. Harry is too short. He rises to his toes. Snape's fingers in his shirt, Snape's pulse beneath his fingers. Blood on his hands. Crisp white sheets. Venom and potions. Snape rushes past Harry as if he isn't there, as if he doesn't matter. "Ah, but you don't have any nerve, do you, boy?" Snape says. "Stop," Harry says. "Fuck you," Neville whispers. "Detention," Snape says. "Stop," Harry says louder. "And you," Snape snarls, and Harry's heart leaps as Snape turns to him, strides menacingly forward. Harry straightens his back and tilts his chin up. This is defense against the dark arts. Surely you know better than to throw yourself into the line of fire. Snape's eyes drop to Harry's loosely held wand. You have better means of protection than becoming a human shield. Unless, of course, you miss playing martyr. Harry's neck and cheeks heat. His fingers tighten around his wand. Snape has a point, of course, and the jolt of panic that touched him seems a feeble excuse for stupidity. You weren't doing much to defend yourself, sir, Harry retorts. Snape lifts a brow and glances over his shoulder at pink-cheeked Neville. I saw nothing I needed defending from. Did you? Neville killed the snake, Harry reminds him. The snake that nearly did you in? Snape frowns. I think he's more than a match for you. Not now, Harry, Neville mutters. With a sword, perhaps, Snape agrees. Longbottom is lucky he didn't need to rely on his wand to get him through this battle. Electricity crackles at Harry's fingertips. Magic or anger or... Snape takes another step closer. Harry leans in. You had a wand, and you couldn't even save yourself, Harry says. Or was that the point? Did you want to die? It was meant to be a jab until Harry realizes that it might be true. Had Snape wanted to die? Had he hoped for it? Did he curse Harry's name when he opened his eyes? Harry might have found out had he not fled. The glimmer in Snape's eyes died away. There is a pause in which everyone holds their breath. Harry would breathe if he could remember how. Better death than this scintillating conversation, I assure you. Snape looks over his shoulder. Class dismissed. Potter, detention. At 5 to 7, Harry and Neville part on their way to detention. Neville straightens his shoulders as he marches toward the entrance hall. Why he agreed, Harry can only guess. Whether to help Harry, or get one over on Snape, or simply to escape Snape's wrath for one evening. The why doesn't matter, so long as Neville mops for Filch and Harry. Harry will do whatever Snape wants. The shiver that strokes down his spine is only a draft. It is cold in the dungeons. Cold, but his hatred sustains him, warms him. Hate. Hate. Snape's office door is ajar. The man himself sits at his desk, marking essays with scribbles and slashes. When he reloads his quill, a drop of red ink clings to the tip, and Harry inhales sharply. Snape pauses, but doesn't look up. You are not Longbottom, Snape says. No, sir. Harry braces himself, waits for the fallout, waits for the glower, the sarcasm, the drawn wand, anything but the scritching of the quill. He watches the muscle in Snape's jaw work, the way his lips thin. But in the end, Snape sets down his quill to flick his wand. On the blackboard the words, I will not be a dunderhead, were waiting for Neville. A piece of chalk zooms into action, crossing out the word dunderhead and writing out nuisance instead. Harry huffs out a laugh, relieved and amused and irritated. There's an itch in his sternum, one he can't name, and one he can't scratch. Lines, Snape? Harry drops his bag by an empty table and pulls out the chair as loudly as he can. Gone a bit soft, haven't you? Snape's hand stills, but he still won't lift his eyes. Harry grits his teeth. Soft. Snape repeats quietly, Indeed. I don't have the proper tools to make the lessons stick, do I? When he does look up, it isn't Harry's face he looks to, but his hand. Harry curls his fingers into a fist. I must not tell lies. Why? Why do you want to mark me? Stupid thing to say, even if he wants to antagonize Snape. A flush creeps into his cheeks, just in time for Snape's eyes to sharply meet his. Harry swallows and slumps in his seat. And you say I have a death wish, Snape says. What is it you're after? Had Snape let Harry speak, he might have said loads of things. How he wants to annoy Snape, how he wants to pay him back every hurt he's caused, how he wants to jinx him silly, humiliate him in front of crowds of shoppers, how he wants to rip the front of his robes, buttons falling to the floor, breath hot on his neck, fingertips cool on the small of his back. Fantasies Harry never thinks of, fantasies he always stops in their tracks, shamefaced in the darkness of his dorm. Curtains pulled closed around him, clutching his pillow and refusing to touch himself. Snape's delicate wrist in Harry's clumsy hands, the thud of a pulse beneath his fingers, hard in his throat. Thank Merlin, thank Merlin, thank Merlin. Snape yanks himself free from Harry's head, and Harry's stomach churns. No, 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 no. Harry is already scrambling towards the door when Snape barks, Dismissed, Potter.
I had to mute myself because I cackled.
Yes.
That was beautifully done.
Yes. It's such a wonderful fic, too.
It really is.
It's, again, one of those that flows and just pulls you through the 20,000 words. Okay, that was Contempt by danpuff, read by Pirup.
Harry's very intense denial.
Uh-huh.
It was palpable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. they do end up getting together in a way. They have encounters, should I say, while Harry tries to be an Auror and be with Ginny and be what everyone expects him to be.
Of course.
And yeah, it's so interesting. There's also, this is part of a series now. This was written in 2022. The series is Love Your Enemy. The other longer fic is Devotion. That's again about 20,000 words, I think. 25,000. That's told from Snape's point of view.
The same story from Snape's point of view.
Right. Yeah, so good. And then there's a number of smaller stories, little vignettes, I guess you could call them.
Excellent.
Yeah. And it says sequel to BA, something to look forward to. All right. Okay, the next one is by T Goblin, or Deep Shadows 2, who's with us today.
Okay, now we get to listen to me read.
Yeah. Yes, we do get to. This is called Peculiar by Deep Shadows 2, read by the author.
Peculiar by Deep Shadows 2, me. 7 years after the Battle of Hogwarts, a changed Hermione Granger Weasley returns, not as a student, but as a professor seeking refuge. Severus Snape, now deputy headmaster, finds his carefully constructed life disrupted by her arrival and the shadows of her past. As they navigate the complexities of divorce, personal trauma, and the lingering echoes of war, an unexpected connection begins to form. Their journey is fraught with emotional scars, hidden truths, and a past that refuses to stay buried. Can they find solace in each other while facing their own inner demons, or will the weight of their history prove too heavy to bear? Of course he would have to fetch the Golden Girl because she couldn't be arsed to walk into the school without an escort. After seeing Minerva pace for the 60th time, he grit his teeth and moved for the door. I'll retrieve Mrs. Granger and assess if perhaps the wards are preventing her entry. That had to be it. Otherwise, why would she stand at the gate for an hour in the snow? Sighing, he marched to the gate, the ground crunching under his dragon-skin boots. He thanked his considerable warmth in this weather to the wool frock coat and pants, not that he was pleased to be out in it. He saw her there, and on his approach he wondered if the wards had halted her. She looked as if she were far away in her mind, her body unmoving save for her breath. As he grew closer, this did not change. Blasted wards, we'll have to look at them, he internally cursed. He had a hard time, upon closer observation and proximity, believing that the woman before him was Hermione Granger Weasley. She was thinner. By the looks of it, she was a stone or two underweight. Her complexion was pale, and her hair, the wild thing it had always been, seemed even unhealthily limp. It had been years since he'd seen the woman, and the contrast between then and now was disconcerting. Her eyes seemed haunted as she looked at the castle, and he cleared his throat to get her attention. It was really of no consequence to him how she looked between now and wartime, he told himself. Nothing. It seemed to him that she was not even aware of him at all. Peculiar. He spoke this time, loudly. Madam Granger, are you experiencing difficulty with the wards? That seemed to rouse her, and her eyes refocused, looking at him intently. However, her gaze went distant quickly, even with it still on him. She looked like she was both looking at him and through him. He was not fond of the sensation. Instead, he wanted to get into the warm castle rather than stand here under her scrutiny. Hermione shook her head slightly as if she was trying to shake something from her mind. He was growing impatient. Are you rendered incapable of speech? Another shake of her head and an exhale that seemed like it was the breaking of some spell. No, sir. I was simply lost in thought. My apologies. Her words were quiet, and that was never a word he would have used to describe the woman before him. He let it pass. It was not his business, nor did he want it to be his business. Yes. Well, your presence was expected over an hour ago, and the headmistress fears you decided to turn her down. If you are done daydreaming, I will escort you to her now. He turned, fully expecting her to jump to attention and follow him. He nearly growled when he heard that the insufferable know-it-all had yet to move. "I don't wish to grow old waiting, Mrs. Granger," he snarled, hands shoved in his pockets, fingers around his wand. If she hesitated any longer, he was going to bring her along via a levitation spell. However, when he said her name, she met his eyes again. There was the fire of the girl who simply could not bear to be wrong. She moved forward urgently. He realized that he was going to yell at her even to get her into the castle. Merlin, how would being her colleague go? Miss Granger, she corrected. Ah, so that is a sore point. Very well. I wasn't aware your divorce was finalized, he quipped, walking at his pace to the castle, a glass of whiskey already on his mind. Her reply was so quiet he almost didn't hear her. It is not. Peculiar. Then I don't see the error of my address. He bit back against her and the cold on his nose. No, I suppose you wouldn't. It was the last thing she said to him for the 15-minute walk up to the gate. Hermione Granger was quiet for 15 minutes. He was sure now something was off. This was nearly inconceivable. This was the girl who could not even let him finish a question before her hand was up. Now she moved like a marionette, a step behind him and silent. For some reason, it uneased him, and he did not like to be uneasy. When they reached the warm entrance, Minerva greeted them, giving him an expression of gratitude as she hugged the young woman. That was when he noticed it. The flinch was almost imperceivable as Minerva touched her, but Severus realized that Hermione Granger was afraid. Afraid of what? He wasn't sure. This was a woman who'd stared down Bellatrix and lived to tell the tale. What did the Golden Girl have to fear from Minerva? When he was dismissed, he offered a polite nod to them both. Headmistress, Mrs. Granger. There, she did it again as Minerva grabbed her arm. It was a full-body flinch, and he saw in her eyes fear. Peculiar. He continued to walk, quietly listening to the women as they discussed him. As soon as he was out of sight, he stepped to the side, watching them. Something was tickling at the back of his mind. As much as he intended to ignore the young woman who had returned to the castle, Severus had a distinct feeling he was about to be roped into another situation, just as he was when she and her cohorts were students. When they turned the corner, he shook his head and headed to his quarters. Fire whiskey would warm him, and his book was calling his name. Whatever storm Hermione Granger was bringing, it could wait until tomorrow. Severus joined the high table for his breakfast. His mind rolled over the details of the books he'd been reading, bending and breaking and shaping the theories and how they could be applied to practical use. He spared a glance at no one, taking his seat to ignore anyone who would interrupt his pondering. He reached for his coffee when his eyes swept over his copy of The Prophet before him. The title caught his eye, and his eyebrow rose as he took it in. Granger Weasley missing, estranged husband worried. He snorted, looking along the head table to spot the witch. However, she nor Minerva were at the head table. That was uncommon, but perhaps they were going over some manner of her taking up the post. Turning his gaze to the paper, he continued reading. As of 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, Miss Hermione Jean Granger Weasley has been missing. While that is a noticeably short time, her husband is distraught, citing that they were working on things and trying to save their marriage when she left for a walk to clear her mind. The young man was desperate to get the word out. He is convinced that she has been taken against her will and offers this to anyone involved in the plot. If someone has her, they will pay dearly. Return my wife safely, or you'll see for yourself how dangerous I can be. Isn't that the purest love? Mr. Weasley also asked everyone to keep their eyes out for sign of his wife and contact the ministry if they spot her. Mr. Potter, Mr. Weasley's best friend, was not available for comment. Still, his undersecretary informed the prophet that Mr. Potter is taking the situation seriously and looking into the matter. As for our missing heroine, Hermione, we hope for her swift return. It was the collective gasp that had him lift his head from the paper. Minerva and Hermione were walking into the hall. He and Minerva met eyes. He gave her a quirk of his eyebrow, and she responded with a look that told him they would speak later. Mrs. Granger, however, was looking down, or at Minerva, not meeting the eyes of anyone watching. Minerva guided her around the table and gestured that she sit at the empty seat to Severus's left, the seat between him and Professor Anadora. He gave the nod to the headmistress and went back to his coffee and toast. He made a point to ignore the woman beside him, offering an excellent glare to the student looking her way to silence them. Good morning, students. I have an announcement. As you can see, we have a new addition to the head table. Professor Granger will be taking over for Professor Anadora after the winter break. Professor Anadora wishes to settle down with her new little one on the way. Please help me with welcoming Professor Granger. Minerva called over the crowd, leading the applause. Severus gave a few claps before returning to his breakfast. He did his best not to listen as several of his colleagues came over to greet the woman. However, he would have thought Minerva had the presence of mind not to put her next to him. However, there were only 2 empty seats, and both of them were on either side of him. Neville tried to get information from her on the divorce, and he noticed how she quickly shut it down. Once the fanfare was over, she sat down, and he heard the deep sigh. Please don't bother me, Severus thought with intent, trying to force his presence to convey it without speaking to her. He suspected it worked, as she said nothing. He finished his breakfast with haste, in case her self-control ran out, and made a quick departure. He tucked the copy of The Prophet into his office desk, as he began his day of teaching without another thought to Granger and the trouble that followed her. Even when he saw her at meals, it was easy to ignore her, as she pleasantly seemed to make herself as small as possible. He found he might like this new, quiet, non-irritating Granger. She was tolerable to be in the presence of. There was a tickling in the back of his mind about the fear he'd seen, but he knew that no one left the war unscathed. Perhaps she hadn't completely recovered yet. Granger Weasley located. Wizarding World exhales in relief. Severus groaned at seeing the paper. Had his life come back full circle to this? Would he spend every day hearing nothing but what was going on with her? His groan must have been louder than he realized, because the woman to his left snorted. I feel the same way upon seeing me in the paper, Hermione offered, eating gingerly of some ham. He spared her a glance, raising his eyebrow. Surely not. I was under the impression that you and your cohorts thrived on this sort of exposure. False modesty is not impressive. There, that would return them to their quiet existence. Hardly. I'd rather they forgot my name. Now that was peculiar, coming from someone who strives so hard to make a name for herself. I find that unbelievable. You would, wouldn't you? She quipped back, adjusting in her seat so she was turned more from him, as if she were ending the conversation. He was tempted to continue. However, he honestly had no need. He turned back to the paper. Miss Hermione Granger Weasley has been found safe and sound. Mrs. Weasley has taken up an open post at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. As some may know, their current Muggle Studies professor, Professor Anadora, is in the family way and will be retiring to become a mother in the winter. To fill her place, the current headmistress, Minerva McGonagall, has appointed Mrs. Weasley to the post. Headmistress McGonagall had this to say about the missing situation. Perhaps Mr. Weasley did not listen well enough to his ex-wife. He seemed to have this issue as a student as well. I've been speaking to Mrs. Granger about this post for over a month, in correspondence sent to their home. This should not have been a surprise. Now, I would like it if you left the grounds and allowed our newest staff member to adjust to her post. There you have it. The missing heroine is safe and sound in the walls of Hogwarts, educating the young on the Muggle world, which, her being Muggle-born, must be the perfect post for her. Severus checked the weather, then closed the paper, finishing his breakfast, and then standing to leave. As he stood, he watched as Neville walked up behind her and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. She jumped nearly 3 inches out of her chair, gripping his hand hard. Her eyes met Severus's as she whipped around, and Severus tilted his head in question. Looking down and then back to Neville, she never looked back at him. That was a fear response again. Severus never remembered her being so jumpy in the hospital room when others would come in unexpectedly. She always seemed to know that someone was there. That was peculiar behavior from her now. That tickle of familiar and yet strange in the back of his mind reared up again. Still, he reminded himself that he was doing his best to stay out of her endeavors and walked toward his classroom.
I never noticed until you read that you actually say peculiar like 4 times in the chapter.
In the very early chapters of that fic, part of the reason it's named as peculiar is because that was his thought process, is that she was being peculiar. So yeah, that kind of phased out as it got farther along, especially as like I went through changes in how I wrote the chapters. But like, especially because the early on iteration of what that fic was supposed to be is not what it became.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to dive into it yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
I feel like I'm picking up the plot, and maybe I'm wrong, but if I'm right, I do really like fics like that.
I mean, you probably are picking up like some of the major plot.
Yeah.
There was like a notation that like I needed to discuss the warnings because there are warnings on this fic because it does go into like some pretty intense themes.
That was the impression that I got, yeah.
I don't know. Do you want me to read what the warnings are or?
Yeah, you could go ahead and do that.
So I tried to tag everything I could think that happens in the entirety of this fic in the tag. So it's hurt, comfort, angst, alcohol abuse / alcoholism, domestic violence, abuse, emotional, psychological abuse, physical abuse, past sexual abuse, slow build, panic attacks, trauma, post traumatic stress disorder, recovery, an eventual happy ending, psychological trauma, infertility, soulmates, pregnancy, high risk pregnancy, unexpected pregnancy, supernatural creatures, magical creatures, past infant death, and Ron Weasley bashing.
Wow, that's even more stuff than I would have expected. But I mean, I do think it sounds like I was picking up on some of where you were going with that.
Um,
Uh-huh.
and this fic actually has a sequel that I actually am like working on little by little
Oh.
Uh-huh.
because honestly, this fic should have been split into 2 fics. Like at chapter 50, I should have stopped and made it into another fic.
Uh-huh.
But I didn't, and I didn't realize I was going to need to at that point either. I wasn't 100% sure we were going to make it to 100 chapters because I wrote this whole fic in a year.
Wow.
Like I started writing it on August 2nd and I posted, it says completed on 3/1, but that's because I posted an update about the sequel. But I posted the very last chapter of it on 8/6 the next year.
That's a lot of work in a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I should have divided it in half. But yeah, I draw from experiences like in my own life and in the life of people around me. And it goes into some pretty intense things. I was too at that time going through a divorce. So, because that should be a tag I add in there in divorce, but you can pick it up in the first 2 chapters that there's a divorce going on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know how to talk about myself.
Fair enough. I'm right there with you. But it sounds like it was a really cathartic fic to write.
Oh, it was. Going back and rereading the chapter aloud for this, like, reminded me of the fic. Like, I go back and read it once every, like, year or so, because it takes me, like, a week to read through it. And that's why if you were listening, you hear, like, certain moments where there's, like, a certain lit of laughter in my voice. It's because I'm remembering writing that
Right.
line.
Mm-hmm.
It's like remembering writing it and where you were when you were writing it.
And just, like, the level of annoyance put in Severus's voice at that time brought me so much joy.
Mm-hmm. Very Snapey. It is 590,000 words, so it's a nice meaty fic to get into.
Right.
And there, like I said, there's a sequel that I am slowly working on. I have an entire notebook full of notes for it and
Oh, nice.
what's going to happen. I just haven't sat down and updated a chapter in like a year on it because I just keep adding to my notes instead of sitting down to write a chapter.
Yeah.
That's fair. All right. Well, thank you for coming on and for reading this for us.
No worries. It was a fun experience.
Good. Okay. Let's see. Now we're going to Severitis. This is called House Potter for Children in Need. And it's also time travel. I don't think that's quite the right thing. But what makes it Severitis is he's kind of a brother figure to Harry, and we'll find out why.
House Potter for Children in Need. Written by Ailec 12 and read by Serena E.W. Summary. 8-year-old Severus Snape wakes up alone at home, only to be later dumped in another house. There, he must put up with an annoying toddler, a creepy cat, and 2 adults that cannot be trusted. The place is Godric's Hollow and the year 1981, except for the fact that Severus thinks it's 1968. Chapter 1. Prologue. Over time, Albus Dumbledore had learned that fooling oneself was hardly ever advantageous. Thus, the moment it became clear that Severus had failed to report back as agreed, rather than be merely late, the old wizard did not attempt to ignore the nagging suspicion that prompted him to investigate the reason for such disappearance. And yet, he was well aware of the number of possibilities that would have prevented a spy from sending word without necessarily implying betrayal. He resolved to wait a couple of days, but nothing changed. After conceiving something like an escape plan, in case the situation went awry, Albus apparated in the desolated area of Cokeworth, known as Spinner's End. Not a light remained in the street, so there was no need for his deluminator in the dead of the night. He allowed himself a pensive look around, and then he marched without any further hesitation towards one of the decrepit little houses. He'd been there only once before, shortly after Severus had started spying for him. He had insisted on adding his own ward, so that the young man could be protected if he were ever discovered, and so that Albus could better control who entered the place. At the moment, when he approached the porch, he could not detect anything amiss with the protective spells. The likelihood that Severus was not home increased. He muttered the appropriate counter-charms and stepped into the property. A wandless Alohomora opened the front door and granted him access. The shabby interior reflected the sorry state of the entire building. Once again, he wondered how someone as proud as a prince had ended her days in that sad little corner of the world. And, not for the first time either, Albus thought whether the Hogwarts faculty could have done more to avoid seeing their own students just fresh out of school joining Tom. Turning away from those fruitless thoughts, he crossed the hall. Everything was covered by a dense layer of dust, as well as surrounded by stale air, but numerous footprints betrayed its apparent abandonment. He stepped through the only door to his right, leading into the living room. There were a few bookcases that looked somewhat better kept than the inherited threadbare furniture. He perused the book collection, finding concealing charms on some of the darkest volumes. It was nothing unexpected, and Albus crossed the door leading to the kitchen. Some empty food boxes and dirty bowls on the old wooden table confirmed someone had been there, but not when. He stopped, straining to hear something other than deadly silence, but it seemed like he was truly alone in the house. Undoubtedly, Severus would have sensed the wards letting him through if he'd been inside, and so Albus's mind reeled with possible scenarios. He tried to think objectively whether it was more likely that he had been double-crossed, or that the dark-haired man had encountered trouble. Love was a powerful reason to walk the hard path of self-betterment, but the headmaster doubted the commitment that such a selfish love could bring. He was afraid that, if Voldemort's open acceptance and acknowledgement had worked once, it could happen again. And even though Severus did not know everything that happened in the Order, no one did, except perhaps for its leader, he had still learned information that Tom would find extremely interesting. On the other hand, if they had uncovered his role in Peter Pettigrew's arrest, his young spy was dead. However, there was no one who could have disclosed this piece of information, since not even other Order members knew that Severus had been the one to reveal Peter as a Death Eater. It was one of the many precautions Albus had taken, as well as keeping Severus's change of heart a secret. Neither option was particularly pleasant, and the old wizard strode out of the kitchen, forsaking for a moment his usual calm demeanour and returning to the hall. He was tempted to finish his search at that point, but he considered that he might find a clue about his former pupil's disappearance in one of the upper rooms. Slightly skeptical, he started to climb up the stairs, ignoring the constant creaking under his boots. If there was anyone waiting to ambush him inside the house, they would have heard the front door screech earlier. The first door on the first floor led to what looked like a child's bedroom. It was bare, but for a small single bed and a wardrobe. The bed covers sported faded colours and several little holes, likely eaten by moths. Yet they were rumpled at the foot of the bed, as if someone still slept there. Suddenly, Albus froze as his senses put him on full alert. He could clearly feel another magical presence in the room. Very slowly, he looked around, seeing no one. A discreet, non-verbal spell was enough to show that the person was hiding in the wardrobe, though, and he readied his wand. Even so, there was no fear in his stance. The furniture was hardly an ideal location from which an adult could attack, and any competent wizard or witch would have chosen to face Albus earlier and try to escape. With another wave of his wand, the wardrobe doors burst open, revealing nothing at first. Then there was movement at the back, and he cast a lumos to scatter the shadows. A sharp intake of breath followed, and he came closer, bending over to take a better look. A young child was curled up in a ball at the bottom of the wardrobe, barely daring to peek up between his fingers. Black strands of hair covered his face, but Albus could distinguish plain terror in his equally black eyes. Of all the scenarios he had envisioned, coming face to face with a much younger Severus Snape had never crossed his mind. Even in the semi-darkness, his striking features were distinctive enough that there should not be doubt about his identity. In truth, there were only two possibilities. Either the child was really young Severus, regressed in body and mind to a time when they had not met yet, or it was a trap set by Tom to infiltrate one of his own followers among the Order. After a few seconds in deep thought, the headmaster decided to act as he would with an unknown child in order to attempt to shed light on the situation. He whispered softly. There was no answer, and the child seemed to tighten his hold on his knees. "What are you doing here, little one?" He was met with silence once again, but Albus thought the young eyes were currently staring at him with a hint of contempt. It had indeed been a familiar emotion for Severus throughout his school years, and it relaxed the old wizard. He tried a different approach. "Allow me to guess. You're about 6 years old?" he asked, reckoning he had missed the mark by a year or two. Effectively, the boy uncurled a little outrage running through his small body. "I'm 8!" Albus nodded, straightening up. He left plenty of room for Severus to get out. "I am afraid that it is still much too young to be on your own. Why don't you come out and see what can be done about it?" The boy remained where he was, eyeing him warily. His grandpa voice, as Minerva called it, usually managed to make him look completely trustworthy. Then again, Severus had never had the easiest time putting his trust in anybody. He waited patiently for the child to make up his mind, or say anything else. "Are you a wizard?" he finally chose to ask in a whisper. "I am," answered Severus pleasantly. "My name is Albus Dumbledore. I am the head—" "I know! You're the headmaster at Hogwarts. My mom told me about it. Losing his grip on his knees completely, he assessed the old man with his characteristic intent gaze, as if that bit of information changed everything. Albus did not react to the interruption and, instead, focused on the child's obvious enthusiasm. That is correct. Would you like to come out and tell me how you ended up here by yourself? At some point during the conversation, he had rejected the idea that the situation could be a trap. The boy was acting just like any scared 8-year-old would in such bizarre circumstances, yet no one who had met Severus later in life would have dreamt of impersonating him in such a candid way. Severus himself would have come clean about what had happened, embarrassing as it could have been, rather than expose his fears so freely. Reluctantly, the child jumped out of the wardrobe and, in the glow of the wand-lighting charm, Albus could see the deplorable state he was in. Thin as a rail, he was also visibly dirty, and sporting 2 ugly bruises, one around his neck and another one on his left cheek. The headmaster could not help it when a slight frown showed up on his face. He had known that Severus's home life had been far from ideal, but he had not been aware of the extent to which that was an understatement. The boy seemed to become self-conscious at the thorough examination conducted by pale blue eyes, and looked down at the floor, fidgeting with his hands nervously. "Would you care for a sweet?" Albus offered, producing several muggle-boiled sweets he always carried with him. He hoped to put the child at ease, though adult Severus had never indulged in such things in front of him. Young Severus looked at the palm of his hand avidly, but did not make a move to take anything. Little by little, distrust filled his dark eyes again. "Where are my parents?" "Regretfully, I cannot answer that," explained Albus, not once losing his perky tone. "Suffice it to say that they are unavailable for the moment. Now, child, what is the last thing you remember?" Severus's gaze went from his outstretched hand to his clear blue eyes a couple of times before offering any reply. "Dunno. I just woke up and the house was different." "You may take one." However, his insistent achieved the opposite goal, making the boy withdraw further. Biting back a sigh, the headmaster returned the tasty sweets to his pocket. "Where did you wake up?" He was not an easy man to surprise, but the unwavering dark gaze did not suit its starving, childish frame. In any case, his silent wait was eventually rewarded with a curt question. "What do you want to know?" "Perhaps we'll find a clue that will help us understand what happened," he answered truthfully. After another quiet deliberation with himself, the boy nodded, albeit grudgingly. He led the older wizard downstairs, back to the dark hall. There he opened a concealed door that hid another set of stairs. "I woke up in the cellar," Severus muttered. He had his eyes fixed on the darkness below them. "It must have been quite a frightening experience," Albus said, strengthening his lighting charm and starting to descend the stairs. The boy followed him without a word. The cellar was covered by shelves filled with glass jars and old books. He could sense the heavy feeling of dark magic in the room, and he guessed it was in there where Severus brewed the potions requested by Lord Voldemort. When his young spy had confessed that his role as a Death Eater involved this type of brewing, his voice had held a hint of haughtiness, as if he were trying very hard to convey how unapologetic he felt about it. His younger version, however, looked very anxious, giving the impression of wishing to be anywhere but in the cellar. Albus looked down at him, lifting a single white eyebrow which seemed to obtain better results than asking actual questions. Mum's never got so many things lying around. I wanted to clean it up, but she doesn't let me touch her potions. Albus ignored the boy's worries, utterly irrelevant at the time, and came closer to the cauldron he had failed to notice right away. Fortunately, the fire under it had been extinguished, although the semi-solid mass inside did not look very useful anymore. He was no expert in the subject, but he collected a sample nevertheless to see whether he could find out Severus's latest project through Horace. You never shared who you or your mother might be, child, Albus commented offhandedly as he put the glass vial into another pocket. As he had intended, the boy looked bewildered by the sudden change of subject. Thus, it did not take as long to have an answer that time. Severus Snape, sir. The honorific was added belatedly, as if on second thoughts. However, there was no longer defiance in his young expression. He might have understood he would not be allowed to remain in his home unsupervised. My mum's a witch. Before marrying my dad, her name was Eileen Prince. Albus pretended to be considering that information. It was not going to be easy to choose a suitable replacement where he could leave the child while a solution was found. Severus was 8 years old and utterly vulnerable in his current circumstances. He needed someone who would be willing to look past his joining the Dark Lord, and so willing to protect him. Who would step up and take on such a task, though? No one knew about his role as a spy for the Order, only about his allegiance as a Death Eater. No one even knew about his greatest sin, or his greatest accomplishment either, and yet only the former needed to remain a secret. A plan started to take shape in Albus's sharp mind. Well, Severus, I know of a nice couple that would not mind taking you in while this situation clears up. The boy did not bother to hide his apprehension, and the old man's smiles proved to be useless to set his mind at rest. Alas, it could not be helped. There was only one safe place for young Severus with the war raging on. It was very fortunate indeed that they had agreed to choose Albus as their secret keeper after learning of Pettigrew's betrayal. This way, paying them a visit would be easy enough. The end, or rather, the beginning. Thank you for listening.
That was really compelling.
Yeah,
And clever.
Yeah.
yeah. That was House Parter for Children in Need by Ailec 12, read by Serena E.W. Very good reading. Serena's a pod vicar, so
Oh.
as are several of the readers today. I really love this fic. It's kind of, you start with a traumatized, mistrustful little Severus.
Does he stay a kid the whole fic?
He does.
Oh, I love that.
It's like they don't know how to reverse it, so so yeah, he is a kid for the whole time. And then when he goes to see the Potters, or go to stay with them rather, James has a very hard time.
I imagine.
But slowly, in Severus's case, very slowly, do they learn to trust each other.
Well, I think I'm gonna have to read that one.
Yeah, it's worthwhile.
Yeah.
Let's see, that was about 120,000 words, and from 2020. It just was finished in the last month, actually. So a real treat. All right, well, let's continue on. This next one, see, we kind of had a trauma theme carry from the last fic to this one, and this continues on in a different way, of course.
So the theme is trauma core.
Trauma core, yes, that's a good way to put it.
Great for summer reading.
Yeah.
It's hot for those of us on the northern hemisphere. we're already suffering. Might as well suffer in fic as well.
Well, I mean, you could say that it has a chilling effect.
Ah, yeah, there we go.
There you go. Yeah. Well, this is a snack.
Oh boy.
Yes. Called To the Eyes, to the Light, in Safety. It's by Barkin, and it's read by Mango. This story contains, well, it gives you a trigger warning for graphic depictions of injury and torture. You can skip over about 25 minutes. That should cover it.
Mango Tart reads, To the Eyes, to the Light, in Safety, by Barkin. Summary. After missing several order meetings, Severus reappears 13 days later, injured and trapped clothing. Sirius is tasked with healing the man. Sirius was not expecting himself to question his views about his childhood enemy, let alone fall for him. Severus does not make it easy for him. He vows to rescue Severus from the occlumency-induced wall he can't escape from by himself, sparking off a relationship that ends up saving Sirius from his own prisons at high price for Severus. A story that centralized on order work if Severus was no longer able to be a spy. From Chapter 1. Previously, Sirius takes to drinking to stave off the boredom and frustration of being marooned at 12 Grimmauld Place. Harry, Hermione, and the Weasleys arrive for the Christmas holidays. Everyone is worried about Severus Snape, who has been missing for almost 2 weeks. Night had long fallen. The cold winter air had dropped even colder. Remus had closed the windows and thrown more wood on the fireplace. He had spent the day keeping himself busy, cleaning and dusting the second-floor bedrooms that weren't occupied by Weasleys or Harry. He sat down at the kitchen table with Sirius, Arthur, and Molly and poured himself a small glass of the wine Molly had opened earlier in the day. It had been a rambunctious day, from what he could hear, and Sirius had tallied up that Fred and George had managed to balance 5 bubbles on his ears as Padfoot before he got too excited and shook them all off. One had landed on the hardwood floor and cracked. However, Hermione magically fixed it before Arthur insisted on getting sticky tape. Molly had meant and hoped he hadn't been waiting long outside if the doorbell was in fact broken. "Sirius?" she called again. Laughter rang from the kitchen. She sighed, decided since they couldn't hear her that she would just let Charlie in and get Arthur to sort the doorbell out tomorrow. She rushed towards the front door, braced herself in her excitement to see her second oldest son. She swung the door open and saw nothing, just the cold, dark night sky over the rooftops of houses along the street. She wondered if she had imagined hearing the pop of someone operating. Her anticipation to see her family so strong she had conjured up the faint sound of a knock at the door. Her eyes were drawn downward to the doorstep, and she screamed, "Arthur! Sirius! Arthur! Sirius, come here, now!" "Mom, what is the matter?" Ginny had popped her head outside the living room door, alarm deep on her face. "Go upstairs, now! All of you!" The Weasley children knew better to argue when their mother was like this. They picked themselves up from the floor and ran upstairs. Hermione grabbed Harry and dragged him upstairs too, not without taking a look behind her shoulder to see what had caused Mrs. Weasley to become so upset. Hermione couldn't see anything. Sirius and Arthur had bolted towards Molly and blocked the view from the front door. Hermione closed the door to the boys' bedroom behind her and listened out for any clues to the disturbance. Molly had taken a step back, trembling from shock and from the cold air. "We need to bring him inside," Arthur said, reaching into his shirt pocket for his wand. Sirius had already knelt down and placed his arm under the bloody shoulders of Severus Snape, his other arm under his legs. He picked him up, adjusted his weight so he could carry him securely to the living room sofa. Sirius felt the other man's head loll back, unconscious, against his bicep. Snape's cheeks were gaunt, and his head was bleeding. Blood seeped into his own clothing. Sirius couldn't tell how much of Severus was bleeding, but he could tell that a lot of him was damaged. He felt irregular tremors emanating from the body in his arms. He placed him gently on the sofa, running towards the kitchen to get the first aid kit Severus himself had made for everyone. He saw the kids on the upstairs landing looking through the banister. "Promise me you'll stay upstairs, all of you," he ordered. He ran back to the living room where Remus and Molly were attempting to assess the situation. "He apparated. I heard the noise. What on earth had happened to him?" Molly was still shaking, but she was in healer mode, looking over the wounds to see how to help. "We should let Dumbledore know. Ask him to bring a healer within the order to help," Arthur said. "I'll do it." Remus conjured his Patronus. A silvery wolf galloped off to alert Dumbledore of the emergency. "His leg is bleeding. It's going through onto the sofa. Get some Dittany." Molly pulled the trouser leg up past Severus's knee. His leg had been splinthed. He would need more than Dittany. Did they have any Mortlap essence? Of course they did. She pulled out the jar of thick purple liquid. Sirius had unbuttoned Severus's white shirt, stained deeply red, and had applied the same essence to the wounds on his chest. He started to apply it towards the deeper wounds along his lower ribs, when he realized something was very wrong with this part of his body. He counted the ribs poking through his emaciated skin, gently prodded where the lowest of Severus's ribs should have been. I think he's missing a fucking rib bone." Sirius felt nausea swim around his stomach. "Excuse me?" Remus gasped. "What? How?" He looked at Severus's exposed chest and torso, noticing that the rib bones poking through were visibly uneven on each side, a deep wound where his lower left rib bone would be. Severus's arm jolted with the impact of strong tremors. A popping sound echoed from the open front door. Dumbledore walked in, Madame Pomfrey following closely behind. "Move out of the way, please," she commanded, grimacing at the body on the sofa. "What have you already administered?" Molly gave an account of what had happened in the few minutes when they collected Severus from the doorstep and summoned Dumbledore with Remus's Patronus. "Professor Dumbledore, I need you to move aside too, please." Dumbledore pretended not to hear her. He had picked up a green bottle of wide-eyed potion, unscrewed the lid and placed 3 small drops into Severus's opened mouth. "Albus Dumbledore, what do you think you're doing?" Madame Pomfrey gasped. "It is imperative that we know what has happened to Severus the last 13 days. We additionally need to know if there is any risk to the order." "That will need to wait. He's my patient, and I insist you stop this." Severus opened his eyes weakly, his consciousness dangling on the strength of the green liquid dropped into his mouth. The unknown tremors electrocuting through his body increased with the stress of forced awakening. "I will perform legitimacy on Severus. He cannot be expected to recount his experiences verbally in his condition. I will explore his recent memories to gather what has happened." Dumbledore placed his hands on either side of Severus's face, supported his eyelids open with his thumbs. Dumbledore concentrated and maintained direct eye contact with the partially conscious Severus. Sirius watched as Dumbledore shook him slightly when he seemed to be slipping back into sleep. He heard Madame Pomfrey grow furious behind him. After a while, Dumbledore sighed and closed Severus's dark eyes. He raised slowly from his kneeling position. Severus's skills with diplomacy far outshine my skills with legitimacy. I could see nothing. Dumbledore's face was weighted with disappointment and stress. My apologies, Poppy. My intrusion amounted to nothing. Madame Pomfrey was too furious to respond. She began administering potions and pasties, bandages and essences to the broken body on the sofa. Sirius couldn't look away. The man he had detested for years looked on the brink of death. Evidence of torture and neglect obvious, from the bruises on his hands and wrists, the missing rib, the starvation, and the tremors. He had seen tremors as violent as this before in those who had experienced prolonged crucio against them. Remus grabbed his hand and tugged him gently. We should give Poppy space to work. Let's go wait in the kitchen. Sirius felt himself being led away, his eyes unblinking, focused on Severus unconscious again on his sofa, the wide-eye potion having worn off. Please do not think poorly of me, Dumbledore asked the quiet kitchen occupants sat around the kitchen table. I have been very concerned about the circumstances of Severus's disappearance. The room remained quiet, feeling ill at ease towards the whole events. Remus had conjured a Patronus again and contacted Moody to let Tonks and the other involved Aurors know that Snape has returned to headquarters, injured. The one good thing about this evening was that Tonks could be called away from a potentially and evidently very dangerous mission. Remus felt sick at the idea of Tonks in close proximity to the Death Eaters who did this to Snape. Remus looked over towards Sirius, who was sat very still in the kitchen chair, his eyes focused on his hands placed on the table. Remus smelled blood in the room and saw blood drying on Sirius's palms, his shirt sleeves and front patterned with red from where he had lifted and carried Snape onto the sofa. "Would you like a cloth to wash your hands?" Remus asked gently. Sirius shook himself out of his trance, looked up at Remus. "No, I'll have a shower." He stood up and walked quickly out of the kitchen, leaving the other order members to wait on Madame Pomfrey to update them once she had done all she could to help Snape. Sirius closed the bathroom door and found himself falling to his knees onto the bath mat. He felt overwhelmed, his head spinning with confused feelings. Padfoot ached at the scent of blood and injury, his need to protect going into overdrive. There's nothing he could do to help. Sirius scolded himself. It's fucking Snivelus. Why was he so affected by this? He lifted his head off the floor and saw the blood all over his palms, drying in flecks, coagulating in deeper, sticky pools. He felt Padfoot howling inside him. It was too overwhelming. He ripped off his blood-stained shirt, wincing at the tug of the blood that seeped through his shirt and onto his skin, sticking to the hairs of his chest. He unclothed himself and stood under the hot running water, watching the water turn from dark red to clear as the evidence of Snape's torture swirled down the drain. He scrubbed his body as hard as he could, wanting to distract himself from his uncomfortable sense of overwhelming. What? Overwhelming what? He had no idea what this all-encompassing feeling was, but he just wanted it to pass quickly. He dried himself, wrapped a towel around his waist, and walked out into the hallway to grab some clean clothes from his own room. On his way out of his bedroom, he bumped into Harry and Ginny in the hallway, giving him a shock. "Sirius, what is going on?" Harry demanded to know. Sirius opened his mouth, closed it again, unsure what to say. "I don't think I can say much, but Snape is here. He's in a really bad way. I don't know anything more. We will speak soon. I'm going to see if Poppy is ready to update us." He smiled weakly at the two teens and walked down the stairs back towards the kitchen. As Sirius walked back towards his seat, he nodded at the newly arrived Charlie Weasley, who was sat beside his mother, holding her hand. He was followed into the kitchen by Poppy, who went to wash her hands at the sink. "How is he, Poppy?" Molly asked quietly. Poppy shook her head and sat down at the table. "He's stable. Whatever has happened to him has been a very long, drawn-out experience. Without having him awake to confirm this, I am speculating based on what I've seen in my experience healing." She stopped to gather her breath. "He has experienced the Cruciatus curse. By the extent of his tremors, I would infer that this was prolonged and repetitive. He has had his hands damaged, mostly surface wounds, but they have not been allowed to heal. These wounds will heal quite easily, I anticipate. His wrists are broken, and he has had his 10th rib bone removed. The wound surrounding this rib extraction is jagged and severe, suggesting to me that Severus was conscious when this occurred. It was not performed surgically. That can be seen. He will need to take Caligryphy for both his rib and his wrists." Madame Pomfrey paused again. "His right leg has been splinthed, although this could have been much worse. This should be simple enough to heal with diphthany and myrtle lap essence. He needs continuous blood-replenishing potion for the next few days. He will also need to take healing potion to counter the tremors from the Cruciatus curse." Poppy stopped talking for a few minutes to rub her eyes and take a sip of water. "I will draw up a recovery plan and contact healers at St. Mungo's. They can take care of Severus whilst I am at Hogwarts. I am afraid we cannot risk that, Poppy." Dumbledore shook his head slowly. "We cannot risk bringing unvetted individuals into Order headquarters. That's preposterous. How do you plan on Severus healing without a— Pardon the interruption again, Poppy. Severus will need to stay here under the protection of all the spells hiding 12 Grimmauld Place from enemy sight. There is always someone present in this house, although from understanding of your prognosis of Severus's injuries, it is not expected that it will take too long for him to heal. I didn't say it wouldn't take long to heal. I said I was making inferences. Without knowing what exactly happened, how can I know for certain? The safest place for Severus is here." Poppy closed her eyes and sighed, exasperated by the night events. "I will provide the treatments," Sirius found himself saying. Everyone looked at him from around the table. "I will do it. It's about time I make myself useful." "Thank you, Sirius," Dumbledore nodded. "I don't think it's appropriate for Sirius to provide care for Severus," Madame Pomfrey stated stoically. "The history between the two of them is volatile and As Sirius is not a healer, I do not feel comfortable with his ability to administer care and treatment towards someone he has treated appallingly in the past. He does not know how to see past the patient. Poppy, that's unfair. I'm not a monster. Sirius felt shame crawl down his back. Sirius wouldn't cause more harm to Snape. We were awful to each other as children, but we are grown up and we have changed, Remus advocated. If anything, I think Snape would find it harder to look past Sirius to see the healer. But he has no choice. Sirius is the only one in the Order with the capacity to provide care and treatment for Snape. Poppy looked long and hard at Sirius, as if exploring his soul for any sign that he would or could cause further damage to her patient. I will check on him each week before Order meetings. As often as possible, you will have another person with you whilst you provide care, for support as well as accountability, she added. Since Severus will need medicine across the clock, I suggest splitting care into 2 shift patterns, day and night if feasible. Remus and I can provide care at night, Sirius volunteered. I will be fine during the day, Molly offered. Do you have a room Severus can rest in? Madame Pomfrey asked Sirius. Yes, of course. Is it safe to operate him into the 2nd floor bedroom opposite mine? That distance should be safe to operate without further risk of splinching. Will you do so? And I will carry in the treatments separately. Sirius nodded and walked into the living room, inhaling sharply as he saw Snape unconscious on the sofa. His wounds had been bandaged, and he smelled like herbs blended into all the healing potions Poppy had administered. Seeing Snape again made Padfoot stir, and Sirius felt almost powerless to resist the need to protect the other man. He once again placed his arms under his shoulders and legs and lifted him before operating as gently as possible to the empty bedroom on the 2nd floor. The room was cold. It had been cleaned and had a bed ready, but Sirius hadn't expected to have anyone stay in this room. He placed Snape down on the bed, propping his head onto the pillow. He conjured the fire to enlighten the fireplace, heat seeping through the room like warm perfume. He transfigured a discarded cloth on the floor into a thick blanket and covered Snape to help warm him up. The door opened, and Madame Pomfrey walked in, carrying a heavy bag and placing it on a bedside table. She handed Sirius a piece of paper with a schedule of medicines to take. It was a lot to begin with, expecting to reduce after a checkup from herself in a week. Thank you for volunteering to take care of Severus. Please do prove me wrong about my statement earlier. My responsibility is always with the patient. It wasn't personal. Sirius couldn't take his eyes off Snape, the weight of responsibility and expectation heavy. His inescapable drive to protect the injured man made this weight almost easy to carry. Best of luck, then, Madame Pomfrey said before she apparated away, leaving the 2 men alone in the firelit room.
Wow.
We got a lot of really good fics today.
Yeah, we do.
That was intense.
It was.
Another one I really would like to read.
Yes.
When they were describing the fact that his rib had been removed while he was still conscious, I was sitting here cringing like, oh
Yeah.
no.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's interesting that he's having these feelings that he doesn't know how to name them.
Yeah, it feels really realistic because, like, even if he wanted to be introspective about him, he's so in shock by, what he's seeing that his mind can't even really go there into, whatever feelings of guilt he might be having, or, whatever he's feeling under that initial kind of
Right.
shock of seeing Snape like that.
hmm This was To the Eyes, to the Light, in Safety by Barkin. Is read by Mango and was recommended by Vaga the Great on Tumblr from 2023. Let's see, did I say how long it was? The fic itself is almost 700,000 words.
Oh,
Something to sink your teeth into.
I'm gonna have to read that. I got a lot of stuff to read.
Definitely. Now we'll have another thread of hurt comfort in a little different form. This is All That You Will Be by Morbidmuch.
Yay!
Yeah. I had a hard time picking SSHG ones for some reason, which is weird because it's my OTP. It's just, I have read so many other fics, it's hard to get my brain in that groove again. But I did find this one, and I hope you'll enjoy it as much as I did.
All That You Will Be by Morbidmuch. Summary. The last thing Hermione Granger expected after the war was to suddenly be made responsible for a not-so-dead Severus Snape. Previously, to deal with overcrowding in Azkaban, the Ministry is allowing low-risk prisoners, those convicted of minor offenses, to serve their time in house arrest in the custody of family or someone who could act as a minder. Hermione volunteers to host Snape. Chapter 2. Every Sunday at 1:30 p.m., Hermione flew to the office of Dr. Elvina Larch, a Muggle-born psychiatrist. She had come highly recommended by the healer who treated Hermione's injuries after the war, and it had only taken Hermione 3 months to muster the courage to send her an owl. Since Dr. Larch's practice was in Islington, Hermione often stopped by 12 Grimmauld Place afterwards to visit Harry. He was always busy. Being knee-deep in aura training meant that spare time was a rarity. They usually sat in the kitchen, drinking tea and talking. Whilst Creature had warmed to her a fair amount, he still usually made himself scarce whenever she was around, and she'd not seen him for weeks. "What's it like? Sharing a house with Snape, I mean," Harry asked, crumbling a piece of biscuit between his fingers. Hermione hesitated. "It's only been a couple of days, so I haven't much to say. He mostly keeps to himself. I don't even think I've heard him use the loo." Harry shifted on the bench and the light reflected on his glasses. "You don't suppose does his business in his room?" She rolled her eyes. "He's not some wild caveman, Harry. I'm sure he's just feeling very overwhelmed. And who wouldn't be? He doesn't have his magic, and he's stuck in the same house as a former student." She was sure that Snape had his fair amount of issues related to the war, as they all did. "Right, I didn't think of that." Harry smiled crookedly, and she smiled back. Sweet, wonderful Harry. It would take him and everyone else a while to heal. The last few months, or years really, had matured him fast, and he had come out on the other side a bit quieter and more reflective. Hermione was proud of his decision to not share anything of what he saw of Snape's memories in the pensive, even with her and Ron. Kingsley had all but pleaded on his knees, saying that without those memories, he couldn't guarantee Snape wouldn't spend the rest of his life in Azkaban. Harry had stood firm, offering himself as a witness on Snape's behalf, but he wouldn't divulge the things he'd seen. She respected that. Ron didn't. Her smile fell as she thought of her freckled best friend. "You all right?" Hermione blinked, and she was back in the kitchen at Grimmauld Place with Harry looking at her from under a furrowed brow. "I'm fine, just thinking about Ron." Harry's face fell slightly. "Have you heard from him?" She shook her head. "Not for weeks." Ron had become withdrawn over the past months, and spent most of his time with his family. With the exception of Ginny, who was at Hogwarts, all the Weasley children were currently staying at the Burrow. Fred's death had, for understandable reasons, hit the family hard, and Hermione's heart went out to them. She hoped that, with time, they could start to heal. Sighing, Harry drove a hand through his hair. "I speak with him at training, but it's not He blew out hair through his nose. It's not the same. I know. He'll be all right. He has his family. Hermione eyed him. How are you doing? Still haven't changed your mind about talking to Dr. Lodge? Harry shrugged. I'm doing all right. It gets a bit lonely, with Gin at Hogwarts and you and Ron at your places, but it's not too bad. Ginny's coming down for the halls, so I'm looking forward to that. How are your studies going? Not bad, Hermione said, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I'm grateful Professor McGonagall let me study for the newts at home. It's bad enough I have to go there for the practical portion of the classes. I don't think I could bear being back at Hogwarts full time. Me neither, Harry said. There was a pause. We'll be all right, though, won't we? She smiled faintly. Eventually. Hermione didn't linger much longer. Harry was expecting a flu call from Ginny, and Hermione wanted to get back to Snape. It felt cruel to leave him alone for too long. Seriously, that made him seem like a cat or something. Seeing Snape for the first time in months had been a bit of a shock. His long hair still looked oily and he was rail thin, but he didn't look as jaundiced as before. Not having to serve two masters was clearly agreeing with him. She wondered if the state of his hair wasn't due to poor hygiene, but rather a proneness to oiliness, just as hers was prone to frizz. He had kept mostly to himself after she showed him around the house. She'd barely caught more than glimpses of him entering or exiting his room. But on the first night, she'd been forced awake in the middle of the night by his muffled cries. Leaping out of bed, she'd crept up to his door, wand at the ready. As she'd put her hand on the door, he had quieted down, and she heard the rustle of bedsheets. She could imagine him sitting on the edge of the bed, head in his hands and long hair falling around him like ink. Then the bed frame had creaked, and she fled back to her room. She didn't want him to catch her lurking outside his door. Hermione apparated to the garage and took a minute to compose herself before exiting through the side door. Glancing to the side, she spotted a black-clad figure standing in the garden, his back towards the house. She approached him slowly, the grass crunching underneath her feet. He didn't acknowledge her presence. Professor? He scoffed, his breath a white cloud in the cold air. I'm nobody's professor, Granger. She looked down. His black, heavy boots were a stark contrast to her white sneakers on the frosty grass. I suppose you aren't. Why am I here? Hermione's face snapped up. He still wasn't looking at her, and his hair hid most of his face. Sir, whilst I am reluctant to admit that you have a sharp brain underneath that mess you call hair, I assume you did not petition to be my minder out of the goodness of your heart. And if I did? Snape shifted his head slightly, his eyebrow arching, and his lips curling into a sneer. Then you're more foolish than I thought. His cloak swished against her legs as he spun around and stalked towards the house. Severus removed his boots and cloak by the back door and went upstairs to the box room where he slept. There was nothing inherently wrong with the room. There was enough space for a single bed, a side table, and a narrow dresser. Everything a prisoner would need. Someone, by Merlin he sincerely hoped it wasn't Granger, had brought over several items of clothing and toiletries from his quarters at Hogwarts. They didn't even fill half of the dresser, and barely one shelf in the bathroom at the end of the hallway. It was a handsome house, the kind of house he would have felt sorely out of place in as a child. The furniture was tasteful but homely, and plenty of family photos were scattered around, showing Granger at various ages with her parents. She had her father's smile, whilst her general build came from her mother. It hadn't taken him long to suss out that the subject of Granger's parents was a sore one, since he'd seen her looking longingly at a photograph of them, and there was a fourth door on the first floor which remained closed at all times. Thinking back, he couldn't remember Dumbledore mentioning her parents, even after he relayed the Dark Lord's plan to have them killed. He assumed the headmaster had hidden them, since they clearly weren't living there, but he was starting to suspect that was not the case. Sitting gingerly on the bed, he closed his eyes. It was almost time for his daily potions, and they were far less agreeable on an empty stomach. He'd only eaten sandwiches the past few days, and he was starting to feel it. A proper dinner was sorely required. Bah, that meant he actually had to spend time with Granger. He hoped to avoid that unpleasantness for at least 5.5 more months. Severus curled his fingers around the edge of the bed and reminded himself that strangling the girl would most definitely get him thrown into Azkaban. He was many things, but he wasn't stupid. He found Granger in the dining room, poring over the new level Transfiguration textbook and muttering to herself. He leant against the doorway for a good 30 seconds before she glanced up and jumped. "Cersei, you scared me," she said, putting down her pencil. "Did you need anything?" "I don't know about you, but the rest of us need food to survive. Is there any in the house?" "Oh, it's almost dinner time. I've been studying, I hadn't noticed." Severus rolled his eyes. "If it's not too much to ask, may I request that you don't starve me to death? It would be rather inconvenient, and since I cannot leave to buy food myself, I rely on you for that." The thought struck him that maybe she didn't have any money. "They are compensating you for your trouble." The chair creaked as she shifted. "They are." He arched an eyebrow. "And how much am I worth?" Granger fixed her eyes somewhere by his left shoulder. "I get 90 galleons a week to cover your room and board." "I see." Right then his stomach growled, and his eye twitched. How undignified. "Do you cook?" Her eyes snapped to his, and her chin raised. "If you think I'm going to be cooking for you, you are sorely mistaken. That is not—" Severus inhaled deeply through his nose. He must not strangle the girl. "I was merely going to suggest that we prepare dinner together, or do you not require sustenance?" She blinked twice. "Oh, all right, then." As it turned out, Granger wasn't half bad in the kitchen. He put her on chopping duty, and she sliced and diced the vegetables with as much finesse as she had done ingredients in his potions classroom. It was rather uncomfortable navigating the small space of the kitchen, and twice he came close to elbowing her in the back. When she reached across him over the worktop, he could see the slight shimmer of glamour on her arm. It was presumably a scar or injury from the battle. Merlin knew he too had enough of those. They ate at the dining table, and Granger pushed a pile of books out of the way to clear space for him. Making room for his plate, Severus eyed the titles. "You're studying for your newts?" "I am." Severus speared a piece of carrot with his fork. "Don't tell me you chose to play childminder over going back to Hogwarts. If that's the case, I might lose what little respect I have for you." The tops of her cheekbones pinkened. "Frankly, it's none of your business." Severus turned his attention back to his food. Insufferable child. These 6 months would be long and miserable if they couldn't even have a conversation like normal people. They continued eating in silence. She finished her meal before he did, and took her dirty dishes into the kitchen. Then came the sound of porcelain breaking. He sprung to his feet and raced to the kitchen. A broken plate lay in several pieces on the floor, and Granger sat with her back against the fridge, spasms racking her body, and every tendon in her neck stood out. Falling to his knees by his side, his knee definitely landed in a pile of mashed potatoes. Severus grabbed her shoulders to keep her head from bouncing against the fridge. Tears were streaming down her face. "What do you need, Granger?" She opened her eyes, and they were masked with pain. "Muscle relaxant potion," she stuttered. "Cabinet next to the stove." He was reluctant to let go of her. "Accio potion." Of course, nothing happened, he swore. Carefully laying her down on the floor, he rose and tore open the cabinet. It was empty. Fuck. He turned back to Granger. "It's empty. Do you keep them anywhere else?" She whimpered and managed to shake her head, and he swore again. There was only one option left. Bending, he got her in a seated position. Her forehead was shiny with perspiration, and pain clouded her features. "Wrap your arms around my neck. There you go. And up." Grunting, he managed to get them both standing. "I'm going to take you upstairs to the bath, all right?" The trek upstairs seemed to take hours. Granger wasn't particularly heavy, but she was still twitching and almost smacked him in the face twice. Arm tightly clasped around her waist, he could feel practically each one of her ribs. He opened the taps and turned the temperature to as hot as he could stand. He let out an undignified oof as he lifted her gently and put her in the bath, fully clothed. She whimpered, and her thrashing sent water over the edge of the tub and drenched his trousers. Once the bath was full, he turned off the taps and ladled the water over her neck with his hands. "Deep breaths, Granger," he spoke, voice low. "In through the nose and out through the mouth. That's right. You're doing so well." Severus was unsure how long he sat by the side of the bath, speaking low and ladling Granger with water as he let the heat from it penetrate her twitching muscles. When the water started to cool, he topped it up with more hot water, and for the first time since his sentence, he cursed not being able to use magic. He could help her so much quicker if he had access to his magic. Granger's eyes stayed closed, and her mouth open as she breathed deeply. Every now and again, her brow would furrow, and she would whimper as a large spasm racked through her body. How long must she have been under the Cruciatus curse to still have side effects this bad? With a shudder, he remembered the last time he had been under the Cruciatus curse, when the Dark Lord regained his body after the Triwizard Tournament. Finally, Granger's spasms stopped. Her breathing had evened out, and he was fairly sure she'd fallen asleep from exhaustion. He didn't blame her. Severus squeezed her shoulder gently. "Granger, you need to wake up." Slowly, she opened her eyes. "Let's get you into bed. Can you stand?" At her nod, he helped her out of the bath. Her soaked clothes highlighted how thin she was, and he averted his eyes as he handed her a towel. Once she was as dry as she could be, he guided her into her room. Truthfully, he hadn't spent much time wondering what Granger's childhood bedroom looked like, but he was still surprised by its clinical appearance. There were few personal touches, only a couple of photographs on the dresser and a wilting plant on the windowsill. If not for those, and the Gryffindor scarf hanging off the mirror, the room could have been anyone's. "Try to get some sleep," he said as he let go of her elbow. "You're going to feel like shite in the morning. Maybe you won't forget to stock up on the potion in the future." Exiting, he leaned against her closed door. He had just about managed to forget she had been affected by the war too. It was easier to see her as an insufferable know-it-all than a war veteran. He wasn't likely to forget it now. On the other side of the door, he heard her wet clothes hit the floor. That was his cue to leave. He changed into dry clothes, hanging the wet ones on the shower rail to dry before cleaning up the bathroom. Next, he took care of the mess in the kitchen, and by the time he sank down on the sofa in the dark sitting room, he was exhausted. He closed his eyes with a sigh. How had she managed with the attacks before he came along? Also, it was bloody stupid of her to run out of the only potion that would help. The muscle relaxant potion wasn't too difficult to make. Maybe he could... Severus shook his head. No, he had little money to his name to buy ingredients, and he very much doubted Granger would let him set up a potions lab in her garden shed.
There's nothing like post-Cruciatus to bring people together.
I like the he put his knee in mashed potatoes part. I'd really thought it was going to be that he put his knee in a shard of like porcelain.
Yeah, me too.
And I was like, mashed potatoes. It added levity to an intense scene.
Right.
Yeah, there were little touches of humor through the writing. Yes, this was All That You Will Be by Morbidmuch. It was read by Karas. It's from 2020, 80,000 words, and very enjoyable.
Good hurt comfort.
And slow burn. Always like those two. Now, this next one was recommended to me by Masao, and he also reads it. It's called So Lonely Without Me by Caligryphy.
So Lonely Without Me by Caligryphy. You're up first. Am I? Severus Snape finally glances up from the yellowed edges of the Daily Prophet. He has read it 6 times, cover to cover, including the advertisements. There are several spelling mistakes in the culture section. He has marked each one with a ring of red ink. Each time he sees the crossword, he laments having finished it the first day. Potter nods and takes the newspaper. It's ready when you are. The younger man sinks into the armchair after Severus rises. It is the only chair in the room. Potter usually lies on the bed or stretches on the floor, bare toes wriggling. You know, Potter, if you wanted to sit in the chair, you might have simply asked, he said, working apart the buttons on his outer robe. He faces away. Snape never looks while Potter undresses, and knows the same courtesy is extended. I don't like the chair. It hurts my back. The newspaper rustles. Potter always flips to the sports section. He seems to enjoy staring at the tiny Quidditch players whizzing from one side of the picture to the other. Once he had stared for 7 hours at the same picture. Snape had hidden the wands that night. Everything hurts your back. Everything hurts your knee, Potter sniffs. It's quite one thing for a man of my age to have stiff joints. If you bloody well whine at me about how old you are again, I'm leaving, he huffed. Dramatic, Potter, as always. Snape tosses his robes on the peg by the door. He looses 2 buttons on his shirt and pulls it over his head. Some days I think it is a wonder you've ended up here and not in the Royal Shakespeare Company. Didn't pass the audition. Snape catches his grin then, and peels it away, tucking it out of sight until he can get into the bath. The competition must have been possessed of an even more revolting flair for melodrama. No, they were just taller. The grin threatens to return. Is that what it is, Mr. Potter? I hate it when you call me that. What? Is it as simple as a Napoleon complex? What? The reply is flat. The newspaper folds. This desire to feel your destiny as the savior of the wizarding world, does it come from a sense of duty, or is it simply short man's disease? Sawed off, Snape, Potter growls, glaring up at the half-bare potions master. Severus allows the smile then, forcing it to be a little cooler than it wants. See something you like? The question slips off his tongue in honeyed, venomous tones. For just a split second, he wonders how Potter would react to a serious offer. Then he sees the disdaining curl of soft pink lips. Perhaps 20 years ago, his body might have held some interest. Now, no peeking, Potter. A slight intake of breath, angry and strangled, a few muttered words. What was that? A hex. Your wand is on the nightstand. I don't need a wand to hex you. Potter. Water's getting cold, he cuts in suddenly, the younger wizard's voice soft in loss. Just go. I don't want to do this tonight. Potter uses too much soap and takes his time lolling in the water like an aquarium fish. Severus never does. He wets his hair, scrubs the smell of close quarters off his body, uses a small amount of the inexplicably orange shampoo to lather his hair, and he rinses. By the time he finishes bathing, the water is still fairly warm. Tonight, though, he decides not to get out of the bath just yet. Severus draws his knees up out of the water and lays his head back against the rim of the tub. The silence is not precious. The solitude is. He misses solitude, misses loneliness. The weight slips on like an old robe, misses having his own chambers and a bath that could fill up over a dozen times in a night with near to scalding water. Misses being able to cast warming charms, cleansing charms. Misses the way he can't pace and speak aloud to himself anymore. Now there is someone to hear it. They figured out early that the bath would give them as much water as they wanted, but the furnace, assuredly as old as the house itself, only enough hot water to fill the tub once a day. Severus can't remember whose idea it had been to share. Of course it had been a practical suggestion, a reasonable suggestion. The first in got the hot water, the second at least got water that wasn't ice cold, and it isn't as if either of them is especially dirty anyway. It is impossible when your living space is limited to 2 rooms, but there is something disconcerting about sharing the water. It is another forced intimacy in an already awkward situation. Already Severus knows more about Potter than he ever wanted. He knows that Potter can only sleep with his back against a wall. He knows that Potter snores when he isn't feeling well. He knows that Potter waits for him to fall asleep before he cries. He knows what Potter's bare, slim legs look like, and the lean line of his stomach. He knows that some nights Potter gets cold and lonely in bed, and seeks out the other body for a bit of heat and comfort, his form tucking close against Snape as if using his potions master as a windbreak. He knows that Potter usually wakes up in the morning with an eager erection. Severus Snape knows all this. And he knows he is going mad. He stays in the bath for several more minutes. The water will only be tepid, but there won't be a remark. Potter could probably soak for hours in near freezing temperatures without batting an eyelash. Snape listens to the sloshing through the closed bathroom door when Potter bathes. The young wizard makes an incredible amount of noise for a process as fundamentally simple as a bath. Potter the otter, Severus says quietly to himself, and sinks deep in the water. The door opens and closes with a soft click. Are you awake? Potter whispers. Yes. Severus can hear the rustle of cloth as Potter dries and dresses. He does not look. His eyes are closed, his face buried in the pillow. The double bed is comfortable enough, if a bit too firm for discerning tastes. Sorry. He opens one eye but does not look. Why? Keeping you awake. Yes, because I have so many important appointments in the morning. Potter sighs. Why is it you always have to be so... you? If I were anyone else, you would have killed me. I still might. You might try. Severus burrows deeper into the pillow. The room is already uncomfortably cold, and the blankets aren't warm yet. You would know what hit you, Potter shoots back, a few seconds too late. Shut up, Potter. It's late. Get in. You're the one who complains if my hair leaves a puddle. He looks up then at Potter, dressed in his hideous Gryffindor gold pajamas. His glasses lie on the night table, next to the clock that they'd finally turned toward the wall. That means those green eyes are unprotected, unfocused. The scar is inflamed. It always is these days, but Severus can only see it after Potter takes his bath and pushes the wet hair from his face. He rubs it with a towel, Gryffindor red, and it is only a moment before Potter realizes he is being watched. What? Am I doing something wrong? Is there a proper hair-drying technique I haven't learned? No. Then what? Nothing, Potter. Just get in. Severus watches as Potter slings the damp towel over the arm of the chair and approaches the bed. He crawls easily over Severus and scoots underneath the blankets, arranging himself with a generous amount of sighing and flopping. Finally, he stills. Night, Snape. You are the loudest boy in the entire wizarding world. I'm 24. Stop calling me boy. Good night, Potter. No dreams. No dreams. Severus wakes in the middle of the night, his forehead damp with sweat, his hands shaking, his tongue thick in his mouth. He hopes he hasn't been screaming. That embarrasses him even more than weeping. He rolls out of the bed and staggers to the bathroom. He washes his face, relieves himself, gulps a glass of water. When he returns, his side of the blankets are folded back in a sort of welcome. Potter stares at the shadow in the dark, squinting without glasses. Bad one? Potter asks. Snape nods. He isn't sure if Potter can see it, and adds a yes. I had a nasty one an hour ago. Haven't been able to go back to sleep. Snape grunts and eases himself back into the covers. I didn't hear you. You looked like you were having your own. I almost woke you, but... Potter smiles. After the last time, I still had the bruise, you know. Snape grunts in acknowledgement. They lapse into a short silence. I lied. What are you blathering about, Potter? Their voices sound sleepy, slurred. It is easier to talk this way, to let the antagonism slip under the pretense of exhaustion. You laughed. You looked like you were having a good time at first. That's why I didn't wake you. Thought you might be having a good dream. I did wake you. When it got bad, I thumped you with a pillow. Oh. Snape turns on his side, facing the door to the hallway. The door that anyone wandering down the hallway wouldn't see. The door that is warded and protected by so many spells that it would be easier for an assassin to drill through the floor or down through the ceiling rather than twist the knob. Of course, the rest of the room is warded, too. Thank you, he adds, feeling charitable. You're welcome. Potter is quiet for a few minutes. It was that bad, Potter? Worst this week. I think I'm beginning to panic. I was beyond panic weeks ago. You were not. Was too, Snape retorts. Childish? Yes, but Potter is a child after all. Even if he is 24. Or not. You're snarky, but you're not scared. That's because I am well into utter despair, thank you. That's 2 thank yous. Who are you, and what have you done with my nasty old potions professor? Severus Snape? He's gone round the bend. I'm his replacement, he mutters into the pillow. Well, I'm Harry Potter. It's nice to meet you. A hand creeps around his side. Severus takes it and shakes, trying not to notice the heat of skin and how good just the smallest brush of contact feels. Charmed, I'm sure. Potter laughs, a clear bell-like sound, and Severus smiles into the pillow. They are quiet again for a time. I like you when you're like this. Like what? Like this. Someone else? When you don't hate me. I don't hate you, Potter. He means to say, I don't hate you, as if to suggest loathe or despise is a more apt term, but the sarcasm, it fails, as it does so often late at night in bed with bloody Harry Potter. I don't hate you sounds almost fond. Severus shapes the words noiselessly on his lips. I don't hate you. The admission makes his stomach wrench just a little, and it surprises him that he feels better for having said it. The answering snipe doesn't come. A few moments pass. I don't hate you either, Snape. Are you still awake? Stunned, but awake. Shut up, Potter laughs, and Snape can almost hear the eye roll that accompanies. Potter doesn't hate me. Black is white, up is down. The moon is made of green cheese. And Voldemort's given up his end of the war to care for poor blind orphans in the south of France. Snape snorts. He wants to laugh. Please, you'd sooner find me in bed with Harry Bloody Potter. You are in bed with Harry Bloody Potter, the younger man says. Ah, if only Rita Skeeter were here. Who knew you'd stoop to this for a headline? Who knew we'd stoop to this to save our lives? The laugh in Potter's throat bubbles up at a strange and hysterical pitch. Of the prices to pay, this one is not so high, Severus ventures. Potter shifts restlessly. Do you think... they'll come for us? When? Soon. Soon a week? Soon a month? Soon. Severus says it so often that he can no longer attach any sincerity to the word. That's not enough of an answer anymore. What if they're dead? What if no one knows we're here? What if they've sold us out? What if the war is over and Voldemort's won? Dumbledore secreted us away. He can't do the same for himself. What's to stop the assassins from gunning for him? What's to stop Dumbledore from dying? He's the only one who knows where we are. The only one. Severus feels for a hand in the dark and latches onto it. The wizard next to him takes ragged gulps of air. That's why we've got our wands, Potter. He breathes, forcing his voice to calm. If no one comes, if the food stops arriving, if there's an emergency, we can break out. And what if he told you we could break the wards to get you to agree to this? What if we can't break out? What if he did it to protect us from ourselves like the day he... You're paranoid, Potter. That's why I'm still alive. You're still alive because they caught you in time. Severus lets out a long breath. The hand he grasps wrenches away all its heat and comfort. Just for a moment, his fingertips skate over a hard line of scar tissue at Potter's wrist. Fuck you, hisses Potter. How dare you bring that up? I was... Snape had heard all the rumors, the explanations. Stress, Minerva had said. Shock, Lupin had said. Yes, it is unfortunate. Lemon drop? Dumbledore had offered. Don't you look at me, Snape, barks Potter, kicking the blankets off. Hand me my glasses. What for? I'm going to the bathroom. Just give me... Snape snatches the glasses a moment before Potter arrives, groping blindly at the night table. It's cold. I'm not spending tomorrow playing nursemaid, all because Harry Blood or Potter wanted to cry himself to sleep in the bathtub. He tucks the glasses under the bed. Only then does he realize his mistake. One warm hand presses into his shoulder, holding him down as Potter's wand digs hard into Severus's side. Give me my glasses. No, go to sleep. Damn it, Snape, I'll snap your wand. Very well, I'll break your glasses. And then I'd snap my own wand, and where would we be? I imagine, at Dumbledore's sweet, sweet mercy, he chokes out. Potter doesn't speak for a few moments. So, nothing at all would change. You'd be blind. And Snape gasps as Potter flops back onto his own side of the bed. Have you gone completely mad? I'm trying, Professor. Boy, am I trying. Potter slinks back under the blankets. Freezing. It's only November. It will get worse. What happened to Snape the Optimist? He tends to be put off by being assaulted in his own bed. It's half my bed. Think we could get the dumbwaiter to send us some blankets? You could try, he hazards, though the sudden shift to docile little hairy bloody Potter seems suspicious. Though some form of spell or charm would likely be more convincing than cooing at it like an agitated owl. No magic, chimes Potter with a yawn. Or they'll be able to find us. I know that, silly boy, Snape adds, feeling a bit at sea. His skin tingles, and some traitorous part of his brain is trying to convince him to move closer to the warmth on the opposite side of the bed. He shivers. You're cold too? Snape pulls up the blankets a little further. Unseasonable temperatures. He stares at the closed bathroom door for minutes. No sound comes from beyond. Finally, he raps his knuckles gently and calls, Potter? No answer. Words, mostly the names of deities he's never believed in, interspersed with profanity, spill from his lips. Potter! Potter! No answer. You bloody little snot! Fuck off, Snape! Potter manages weakly, his head drooping against his chest. Why didn't you just hex yourself? Oh no, mustn't do things the efficient way. Of course not. Not for Harry bloody Potter. Don't call me heh. By the time Snape manages to drag the sopping mess, Harry bloody Potter, still in his pajamas, out of the bathtub, the boy is unconscious and chilled to the bone. Potter looks blue. No. His skin is waterlogged and opalescent. He looks like a fish, flapping, shivering uncontrollably on the bathroom floor. Snape curses, snarls, spits, and rips the wet clothes off. At any other moment, his hands would have been shaking. He hefts Potter up by grappling the shorter man around the waist and drags the nearly dead weight into the main room. Severus uses his own towel to pat the worst of the wetness away. Then he shoves the blankets aside, plops Potter in the center of the bed, covers him, and with fingers that tremble only from adrenaline, removes his own sleepwear. Deal with this, Potter. We haven't got a fire, he murmurs to no sensible ear, and climbs next to Potter, wrapping his limbs around the man. The boy! The boy! Snape pulls up the blankets over their heads, hoping to trap more heat. He takes Potter's hands in his own, rubs. After a moment, he turns the boy toward himself. He places Potter's hands under his arms, snakes a warm thigh between frozen knees, and clutches him close. Potter's lips are inches away. They don't look so pink, so perfect. Not now. Severus warms them. "This is very wrong," he tells the room. The room does not answer. Potter is unconscious, but his breaths are deep and even. He is warming up, slowly but surely. Severus locates a cold spot near the young man's collarbone. "Very wrong," he whispers, pausing to kiss that bit of flesh. He manages to stop himself from nipping, sucking, biting. But oh, how he would mark Potter if only. "This, honestly, is wrong. This is a new low. I've been low. This is lower." Snape is grateful that the room, once again, chooses to keep any moral judgment to itself. After all, this is not rape. No, not even bordering on that infamous four-letter word. Not with Severus still in his pants and deliberately avoiding the parts of Potter lurking below the waist and above the knee. But he is taking a fair amount of advantage with the rest. He combs his fingers through the black shock of hair, pulling the last droplets of bathwater out with precise, steady movements. The jagged scars cut in neat lightning bolts across Potter's wrists. A letter opener, he'd heard. Stolen from Albus Dumbledore's desk after a meeting, concealed in the pocket of his robe. Harry had waited until nightfall to try to end his young life. He hadn't managed it. Neither had the Death Eaters in the rather kamikaze assault the next morning, and the evening following. "I have a place, Severus. It is not quite ready, but it should serve. No more than a few weeks. It was made for one, not two. But the boy cannot be left alone. Do you understand?" "Yes, Albus," Snape repeats quietly, his mind clearing as he pauses to lick the corner of Potter's mouth. Potter fits against him, just a few inches shorter, thicker in build, scarred, smooth, soft, hard. His hands map the textures of the cool skin, and finally, Snape insinuates his tongue between the man's lips. "This is very wrong," he gasps out, pulling back, quaking with tension. But Potter does not tell him no. Severus wakes up to a glassy green stare. "Hello," the wizard whispers, stretching against him, heated skin sliding deliciously over his own, slick sweat, pebbled nipples, fine hair, and beneath it, the crackle of pent-up magic. "Potter," he mutters. Beyond greetings, his right leg is imprisoned between two muscled thighs. "I'm not waking up," Harry states firmly, tucking his face close against Snape's chest. "I've decided. This is a dream. I can do what I want. I am not waking up." "Potter," Snape hisses, and a very warm wizard twines himself further in the embrace. Potter's knuckles absently stroke his lower back. "This is not what it appears. This is a dream, Professor," he sighs drowsy. "They both are, after the long night. It's a dream. From now on, a dream. And in the dream, I don't have to hate you. You don't have to hate me, and we can take care of each other, all right? All right?" Harry pleads. "Because it's a dream, you see." Severus smells the shampoo on Potter's hair. He could fight, he knows. He could snap just once and bring back a swift dose of reality to their little prison. But Potter is warm. Potter holds him like a dragon curls around its gold. "Your glasses are under the bed," he says finally. And Harry sighs, and he sighs, and sleep claims them again. He and Harry spend the day in bed. They have never done it before. Their routine was established days after arrival. Usually Snape wakes first, begins his morning ablutions, and by the time he finishes, Potter is awake. They eat breakfast with a moderate amount of sniping. Afterward, Potter begins a complicated series of exercises. The full sequence takes him 2 hours. Snape reads one of the newspapers, or one of the few books. Sometimes he writes, and Potter finishes his exercises and excuses himself to the bathroom to clean up. Breakfast comes automatically, the hatch of the dumbwaiter thumping its arrival. It gives them tea, toast, butter, jam, eggs, and 2 sausages apiece. Today, Severus brings the tray to the bed, and they prop it up across their laps. The eggs are always too salty. Severus can't think of anything nice to say. Eggs are eggs, Potter. But these are salty. Potter is naked underneath the blankets. He does not seem to mind. After breakfast, Severus excuses himself to the bathroom. He lets the water out of the tub and hangs Potter's wet pajamas. He relieves himself, brushes his teeth, and washes his hands and face. When he emerges, Potter has replaced the empty tray in the dumbwaiter. Severus' side of the blankets is folded down. "Come back," the younger man says. Severus does. They do not move much, neither do they speak. When Severus shifts or turns, Potter shifts with him. He refuses to investigate what may or may not be happening below the covers, whether or not Potter is hard, whether or not that supple body will arch into his hands. Before supper arrives, Potter rolls out of bed to use the bathroom. "I'll be 5 minutes," he calls back. The man's arse is glorious. Severus turns the clock from the wall and times him.
All right.
Okay, then.
This fic is shot through with dark humor.
Yes, definitely.
Hmm.
I did enjoy the Snape's gone around the bend on his replacement, and they just like greeting each other while under the same blanket.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're definitely reaching levels of stir craziness from being trapped in that room.
Oh gosh, yeah. And there's just one bed.
Just one bed.
There was only one bed. That happens to be one of my favorite tropes.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Hmm.
And this fic will take some wild turns.
Yes.
It's a good fic. I remember that I was having a bad day, and I don't even remember. This was many years ago. I was at a train station, and I was stuck I was stuck there because I had to wait for something. And I was going on my phone, and I happened across this fan fiction. And then I ended up reading the whole thing, and it really just turned my day around. So,
Oh, that's great.
yeah.
It's 41,000 words, and yeah, it just flows so nicely.
Yeah.
This was So Lonely Without Me by Caligryphy from 2005. Alas, I was not able to get a hold of Caligryphy. The last traces were a live journal entry from 2007.
Wow.
Yeah.
The old days of fandom.
Yep. And this is on fanfiction.net. And yeah, recommend it. Thanks, Maso, for reading and for recommending it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. We're finally at the end. We're at the last fic. Okay. I'll go away. See that face enough, right?
Try to avoid it.
Yeah. Okay, this one is called Falling Apart by Zain, and it's read by me. Falling Apart by Zain. Summary. Severus had always known that he would die in a painful, most horrifying way, ever since back when he was almost beaten to death by his father, then mauled by a werewolf, then thrashed around by a maniac overlord. His miserable, luckless life only seemed to lead to that one day when he would be struck down by a bloody snake of all things. Bleeding out in front of Harry Potter was just the last humiliation Lady Destiny had in store for him. Suddenly staring into Potter Sr.'s eyes again, while being levicorpused, was just the icing on the cake. Chapter 1, Prologue. Summary. The past catches up to Severus Snape. Severus had always known that he would die in a painful, most horrifying way. His life had prepared him early for that possibility. Getting thrashed around by his muggle father in his childhood, then nearly mauled by a werewolf as a teen. Instances like these had been dead giveaways that he wasn't Lady Luck's favorite child by far. Sure, Severus certainly hadn't done himself any favor by foolishly pledging allegiance to the Dark Lord, who suffered bouts of destructive rage directed at everything and everyone in his sight. Becoming a spy hadn't increased his odds of survival either. Expecting a gruesome death wasn't the same as preparing yourself for it, though. When Nagini's teeth ripped through Severus's skin, he felt himself panicking, regretting. As his body was becoming immobilized by the venom, he watched his blood gush from his neck uncontrollably, damning him to death. Even his last breath wasn't allowed to belong to himself, since he found himself staring into hairy, bloody Potter's green eyes as a final humiliation life had in store for him. "Take it," he somehow rasped through the spreading paralysis. "Take whatever you want." Severus was so done with suffering. His sight became blurry. There's really nothing in that desolate shack to give him comfort, to distract him from the pain and regret and everything. Despite pouring out his memories, he felt heavier, not lighter. Potter's head moved over his face, and Severus forced himself into a blink. His eyelids finally complied and closed, but then refused to open again. It was unfair, all that pain, and being alone, and why always him? "You disgust me," Dumbledore had said, when Severus had first kneeled in front of him and begged for Lily's life. "Do I still disgust you? Has really nothing I've done earned me a slightly less painful death?" Just one more time. Just one more time he wanted to look into those green eyes. He had never found forgiveness in them, hadn't done enough to inspire that emotion. Just one more glimpse. But life once again decided not to respect his wishes. When he finally managed to make his eyelids cooperate, it wasn't green orbs that greeted him, but brown irises full of contempt. There's an angry cut on Potter Sr.'s cheek from a sectum sempra. "Of course you're my personal hell," Severus uttered spitefully, shielding his face from the blinding sun. This explosion of light after the dimly lit shrieking shack left his mind reeling from pain. The students laughing in the background were nothing but white noise to him, as he could feel the summer breeze on his bared legs. Magic kept him afloat in the air, in a mockery of a marionette on strings. Nagini's venom must have finally reached his brain. Why else would it make him think he would like to relive his greatest hits before dying? "Your pants are really as dirty as your hair." Let him down. Her voice cut through Severus's thoughts like a sharp knife. Lily, who had crossed the courtyard only moments ago, put her hands on her hips in disapproval. "Sure." Before he could brace himself, Severus crashed onto the ground, his face smashing right into the grass. For a moment he remained completely still, which led to Lily sinking onto her knees next to him. "Oh my God, are you okay?" She sounded worried. Why had he even bothered fighting back all those years ago? He didn't feel like moving. He didn't feel like talking. Just whatever. "Like I said, Evans, I'll leave him alone if you go out with me." Potter repeated his offer. Severus buried his head in his arms. He had enough of this teenager crap. He was just tired. It had never been about him, he thought bitterly. Their fights were just excuses to dance around each other before mating. Instead of disturbing their squabbling, he pretended not to exist. Maybe his wish would come true if he tried hard enough. How many of these did he have to go through before his dying brain would just shut off already? Which memory would be next? His marking? He instinctively grabbed his yet unblemished arm. "Sev, are you hurt?" He opened his eyes, staring right into her green eyes in utter confusion. Wait, did she just go off script? "That's it, Potter. This time I'll tell Dumbledore." "We didn't do nothing," claimed Black, enraged. "He's just pretending. Wants to get us into trouble, that arse. Maybe I should give him a reason to whine." "Just you try." His voice sounded weird, childish. It had not reached the low pitch yet that would make students run for the hills. Severus collected his limbs, pushing Lily's helping hand away. He self-consciously rolled down his robes over his skinny legs and graying underpants before facing the marauders, wand in hand. He did not know who he hated more when looking at these four boys. Two got what they deserved. Two were alive-ish. Lupin the coward was on the run. That much he knew. Or had been on the run when Nagini took a bite from Severus's neck. And Pettigrew, such a turncoat, a rat through and through. Don't hex him, Sev. Lily grabbed his arm as if she expected the worst of him. Well, of course she did. That's who he was. Well, had been. Then reality caught up to him. This was not how things turned out the first time. Call her Mudblood and fix it, his brain suggested. You know how this goes. Finish the memory. However, the decision was taken from him. Come on, boys, let's grab lunch before the next exam. Lupin nervously pushed himself in between Lily and Potter, smoothly directing his friends toward the Great Hall. The bystanders dispersed as well once they realized the show was over. Some students were snickering while making lewd gestures toward Severus. Suddenly, he felt naked. Raw. Severus put his hand around his waist, as if to make certain nobody could remove any of his clothes. The school robes were so open, so buttonless. Was this not a trick of the brain, but punishment? His Catholic father had talked often enough about hell and purgatory and... don't make me go through the days after this memory. Please don't make me face everybody's reactions again. Just move on. Getting marked sounds great right about now. Sev, talk to me. Is everything okay? He looked up in Lily's face. It was so young, innocent, alive. His mind certainly remembered her well. Stop toying with me. Just leave me alone. Forcefully, he pushed her away and ran, ignoring Lily's pained cry. Chapter 2. For the Greater Good. Summary. Severus accepts his fate and formulates a plan. Wednesday, June 16th, 1976. End of 5th year. The memory would just not stop. Severus sat in the middle of the shrieking shack, exactly where a puddle of his blood should be. It felt right to be here. This was where he belonged, not down in the great hall with those children. The paw prints in the dust reminded him of home. After 20 minutes of waiting for the other shoe to drop, he pulled himself together. He didn't know what was going on, what had caused this time travel. Because that's what it was if he was honest with himself. The first thing he had done after entering the shack was to slice his finger with a quick sectum sempra to force his brain into waking up. He could feel pain. During the confrontation with Potter, he had also pushed Lily's arm away. It was a scary realization that he was trying to process. He could touch things, change things. This was no mere ghost of a memory, no fever dream. In a moment of utter madness, he considered that this was Dumbledore's doing, that this manipulative old bastard had cursed him as a final task to prove himself redeemed. Maybe Dumbledore had dabbled with time-turners, just like how he could not keep his fingers to himself when it came to that cursed ring. Then Severus cast that thought aside. Magic ceased to exist when the owner died. And one thing Severus was quite certain about was that Dumbledore was dead as a doornail. No, he had to accept that he couldn't wish this situation away, so he had to face it head on. Walking into the great hall in his dirtied uniform, cobwebs from the shack, grass stains, just the general second-handedness of his clothes, required more courage than facing the Dark Lord in his final hour. Children were cruel creatures. He could feel the stares on his back while he was walking toward the teacher's bench. Oop, wrong direction. Yeah. Nervously, he corrected his course, letting his eyes wander down the aisles. It was upsetting to know what would become of these innocent faces. At the end of the Gryffindor table, Frank Longbottom was holding hands with his girlfriend. Alice Fortescue whispered sweet nothings into his ear, going by the sudden blush he was sporting. Then there was Mary MacDonald, who was chatting with Lily. Her blonde locks were softly bobbing up and down. Hadn't she killed herself some time after the incident with Mulciber? Severus couldn't recall her fate, beside the fact that she was long gone in their time. Marlene McKinnon broke out into a hearty laugh once MacDonald finished her story. No doubt about her future. Severus had been present when Mulciber tortured her to death in her family home. Severus continued down the Slytherin's table. Unsure, he chose a vacant seat near the end, far away from his classmates. He really didn't feel like dealing with McNair, Mulciber, and Avery right now. And it wasn't like they would miss him. No homework during exam week. The group of third years that he had sat down next to threw him a disgusted look. The two girls moved away a couple of inches before picking up the conversation about their crush. Ugh. Who the heck was Professor Cadogan? Confused, he checked out the teacher's table. Seeing their mostly unchanged adult faces was reassuring in a strange sort of way. Despite the bad blood between them and his year's headmaster, he felt connected to Minerva, to Phileas, even to Binns. Of course, Slughorn occupied the chair that was supposed to be his. Full of jealousy, Severus watched his former head of house share a private joke with Pomona. Finally, he dared to look at Dumbledore. This was one face that he could do without. Guilt seeped into Severus's mind, putting pressure on his lungs, his heart. The headmaster seemed alert while studying the newspaper. Severus could only guess which of the Dark Lord's evil deeds were hidden in those pages. He didn't even know the date. Should he ask the third years next to him? In a morbid way, he was curious how they would react if he talked to them. Suddenly, Dumbledore looked right at him. Severus threw up his occlumency shields instinctively, averting his gaze as if caught red-handed. I don't know. Severus did not even bother trying to fib his way through an answer. After lunch, he had followed his classmates to the next exam. Unlike them, he had not done any last-second studying. He wasn't even sure what the subject could be when he was called into the classroom for the practical examination. Apparently, transfiguration it was, as Minerva and a ministry official greeted him with a functional smile. When he was a student, she had disliked him almost as much as when he was headmaster. Despite that, Minerva was a professional through and through. That smile, she was trying to reassure him, to make him feel less nervous. In a weird way, Severus was thankful for that kindness. Had he noticed that back when he sat the OWLs the first time? He could not remember. Gamp's law of elemental transfiguration, Minerva repeated as if he was a small child who did not understand the words. Yes, I don't know that. She blinked 3 times, while the ministry examiner scribbled some notes on her clipboard. We revised the concept last week, Mr. Snape. And while Severus was certain that he had paid attention in that class, it had been 20 years. It wasn't like you needed to know those definitions to do transfigurations. Look, can we just skip that part and I transform this teacup into a hedgehog or something? Apparently, Minerva did not care for his disrespectful tone, based on how she crushed her teeth together. While going through the motions and declining to answer questions on transfiguration theory, Severus just felt disengaged. The first time around, he'd put everything he had into his OWLs. Getting good grades was supposed to be his exit card from this miserable life of insignificance. He had, honest to God, believed that he would go places, that he could just leave Spinner's End and Hogwarts behind, and make a name for himself if he just suffered through 7 years of school and bullying. Maybe find love, too. In the end, his full set of O's had not made any difference. All his life, he had remained stuck in this castle as Dumbledore's henchman. So he really couldn't care less if Minerva failed him. "I heard you blew the practical." Avery plopped down next to him during dinner with a big grin on his face. There had been a mean streak in the boy, and it showed in his eyes. "What do you want?" Severus asked quietly. "Come on, Sniff. I just want to know if it's true. Did you really fail Transfiguration? Didn't you, study for weeks?" Severus just shrugged, taking another bite from his sandwich. He had nothing he wished to discuss with Avery, child or man version. Sure, he was the Slytherin Severus had always been the closest to. McNair was a terrifying sadist, which did not improve with age. He liked killing animals just as much as humans. And Mulciber, he was a fanatic, an extremist even among the Dark Lord's followers. Compared to them, Avery was tame. Just an untalented, mean-spirited boy. On the other hand, is hardly someone to whom Severus could trust. Avery was selfish like that. More than once, adult Avery had spied on Severus to inform the Dark Lord about some perceived suspicious behavior. "Don't you deny it. I heard McGonagall talk to Sluggy in the hallway. Said you couldn't explain Gamp's law to her, let alone the 5 exemptions. Didn't you lecture the class on that just last week?" Apparently he had. "What do you want?" Severus growled, annoyed. Avery raised his hands in defense. "Careful. If Walden hears you talk like that, he's going to hex you, half-blood." Half-blood, mudblood. Severus grabbed Avery's uniform collar and pulled him close. "Care to repeat that to my face?" Avery almost wet his pants, going by his squeaky voice. "What's wrong with you?" "Everything." Severus exhaled slowly before releasing Avery. "Wow, Potter really got you in a mood," the future Death Eater commented. The boy hesitated for a moment before smiling deliberately and making sure that the Slytherins around them settled down after Severus's dangerous rebellion against a pureblood. "You should get your anger issues under control if you want to serve." It was in the middle of the night when Severus gave up finding a wisp of sleep. The boys around him felt like threats, despite the fact that they were just that, boys. It had always been difficult to fall asleep because Mulciber snored terribly. Nobody wanted to sleep next to him, so Severus always lucked out at being put there by democratic decision. Today, falling asleep proved impossible. Avery had brought up one important point that he had not found an answer to. What did he even want to do with his life? It didn't feel like a second chance. His friendship with Lily was in tatters, even without calling her the M-word. The teachers disliked him. His fellow Slytherins looked down on him. There was little family support he could expect. Go away and start anew. That was one option, and quite an alluring one. You were good at surviving, at making do. Leaving without any school credits, without any money or any allegiance. It was an insane idea. For 5 minutes, he allowed himself to imagine such a future. He could start a potions delivery business. He could go to the U.S., travel around, explore, see something else in these dreary castle walls. Then reality caught up to him. He could never outrun the guilt, even if he went to the other end of the earth. He knew about the horrors that were to come. If there was just one death that he could prevent, then was it not his duty, his responsibility, to do everything in his power to save that one life? Maybe that was it. He, Severus Snape, did not deserve a second chance. That one he knew by heart. But maybe destiny had decided that others did, and he was supposed to give them that second chance. All those faces he had seen in the great hall swam to the forefront of his mind. Lily, McKinnon, MacDonald, the Longbottoms. Then, even if he hated them, Potter. Black. All right, once more unto the breach. For the greater good, as Dumbledore would say. Severus couldn't stop chuckling desperately. Will you shut up and stop rolling around? McNair grumbled and threw a pillow across the room. Severus closed his eyes and dived deep into his mind. This was a plan that must never be put to paper. First, he had to find out how to stop Voldemort. It was a pity that Dumbledore had never fully trusted Severus. Well, he had trusted him with his death, but not with his secrets in life. However, the headmaster had unwittingly given him 2 clues. It was not a lot to go on, but it was all he had. Nagini must die, and so must Potter. Otherwise, the Dark Lord cannot be vanquished. So what kind of magic can tie the lives of living beings together? Priority 1 in his agenda: find out why the Dark Lord cannot be killed directly and rectify that. Time was working against him. 2 weeks left, and then it was the summer holidays, and he would be stuck in Spinner's End without any access to magic or owls. He would have to hurry up his research right under Dumbledore's nose, unfortunately. He could just imagine how much the headmaster would love it if he found out that one of the upcoming Death Eaters was looking into immortality spells. 2 things were certain if he wanted to stay in control. Nobody must find out about his knowledge of the future. Nobody must find out about his allegiance.
I am intrigued. Yet another one that I would really like to read. I love the time travel stuff.
Yeah, this is a great version of it. And I don't know, it's like a whole different timeline that he creates.
Yeah.
And he doesn't, ship with anybody, but he does have a friend group.
That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, I know it says no ship, and I was wondering, like, does it stay that way? Which I think is kind of interesting for this, because then it's more focused on him and also the timeline he's creating.
Yeah, there's a couple of possibilities, but mostly he's just so focused on this task.
Yeah.
I guess you could call it a quest. I don't know. Yeah, very good, thick. 217 words. This is Fallen Apart by Zain, and from 2022. So anyway, go back to the bingo game. If you go to snapechatpodcast.com, there'll be a link to it, and I'm going to just keep it open. So it doesn't matter how old the show is. If you feel like doing the form and sending it in, I'll send you some stickers.
Is the bingo card like just saying you read the fic, or is it...
Yeah.
Okay.
Here, I can bring the form up. There's links to the stories. The actual order that the bingo cards are in are the spaces for the fics. And then you can check off which ones you've read. And of course, the center one is free. And that's pretty much it. Yeah. Nobody will see your address but myself. And I'll only use it for sending stickers. So, yeah, it's kind of a fun thing to play along with. I've already had 2 responses.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I put it out on Tumblr and such.
A lot of good fics this time.
Yeah. Yeah, this turned out really well. Except next time I think I won't do 2 snaries and 2 SSHGs.
Well, I'll keep those snoopins in mind.
Okay. Yeah, this ended up being much longer than I anticipated. So thank you for everyone who is still with us. And thank you. Okay. T or Deep Shadows 2.
You're welcome.
And Masao, thank you.
And thank you for having me again. It's fun as always.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, this is my first time doing any like podcast anything, so this was definitely interesting, a new experience for sure.
Yeah, well, I hope you'll maybe join us again sometime.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. You just gotta let me know what you're doing. I mean, SSHG is typically my like foray. I do have experience in other Snape-based ships, but like I currently that's the sphere I exist in. But yeah, no, this is fun.
Okay, everybody have a good rest of your day.
You too. Have a good summer.
You too.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that's the show. I hope you enjoyed the fix and chat. Thanks to authors Deep Shadows 2, Humanveil, danpuff, Ailec 12, Barkin, Morbidmuch, and Zain for permission to feature their fix. Thanks to Deep Shadows 2, Faithless, Pirup, Serena EW, Mango, Karas, and Masao for reading. And to Deep Shadows 2/T-Goblin and Masao for joining me for the listening party. Check out the bingo game that goes with these fics. I'll mail you a Snape Chat sticker for each fic that you read, plus 2 more for 3 in a row. Find links to the form in the show notes or at snapechatpodcast.com. See our additional reading page at snapechatpodcast.com for links to all these wonderful stories and more. And here we must say goodbye. We wish we didn't have to, but it hasn't escaped our notice that life isn't fair. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Tumblr and Blue Sky, or leave a comment at our website at snapechatpodcast.com or on Spotify. We'd love to hear from you. Many thanks to Nix for continued work on our website. Be sure to check out Care of Magical Shippers podcast and alwayssnape.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time, stay snarky.